Hello everyone, welcome to What If Deku Becomes the God of Hyperdeath and Takes Revenge on Everyone Part 3. Before we start, please go support Zack-Oblivion for writing that awesome fanfic. This is the translated version I made. There will be some wrong he or she calling here because it's translated, so let me clear this. Deku is a male in this story. Chapter 22. The beginning of the end. The UA is considered one of the best hero academies in all of Japan and is even known and respected worldwide. An academy from which many heroes who are known and respected today came, including All Might. Today everyone would remember this day because on this day, the famous UA fell. The entire building was destroyed to the point that some parts were on fire. Several of the students and teachers had been brutally murdered and their bodies were found in the hallways, classrooms, even in the courtyard, but the most remarkable thing was that all the bodies had one thing in common: they were all riddled with bones. In the courtyard you could see a boy with pale skin, white hair, a big sadistic smile on his face, but his most striking details were, first, a kind of bright red dot on his chest, and the other was that the boy had no eyes, instead he had two empty beads, from which a kind of black liquid fell in the form of tears. This guy was Killer Izuku, and in front of him were the 1A classes, all of them with serious injuries, and looked with fury and hatred at the white-haired man, who simply smiled at them with mockery and evil. Although there was a small problem: half of the students from each class were missing. Well, little ones, I must say that playing with you was fun, but I can't waste time. My duty was to get rid of all the obstacles. Well, my friends distracted those fools Outer and Barry. Why am I telling you all this? The answer is actually very simple: none of you will get out alive. The white-haired man without eyes exclaimed arrogantly, while a psychopathic smile framed his pale face. Those present were very nervous and scared. These guys had appeared just a few minutes after Izuku left, and things did not turn out well at all. But something important was that a certain chestnut had a huge wound in her stomach, from which blood would not stop coming out. You didn't have to be a genius to know that she didn't have much time left. Flashback 15 minutes before. Everyone in Class 1A was very worried about what was happening right now to their former friend. They knew he was a hypocrite, but they still couldn't help it. Barry timidly approached a sad Uraraka. "Oh, excuse me Uraraka-san, are you worried about Hyper?" the white-haired boy asked, looking at the brunette in confusion. The girl looked up, looking sadly and melancholically at the little freckled boy. He was identical to the Izuku she remembered, except for the color of his hair and eyes. That memory simply made her feel worse. "Yes, I'm very worried about him. I know he's a hypocrite after what I did to him, but I can't help it. I want his forgiveness. Even if he doesn't want to see me, I want him to forgive me. I don't think I can stand him hating me for the rest of his life," said the brunette while a couple of tears came out of her eyes. The brunette smiled as her tears were wiped away. She looked up, seeing how the little boy was responsible. "Relax, I know he'll be able to forgive you and the others. It may take a while, but he will." The white-haired boy's innocent smile made Uraraka smile happily and with some hope. "Thank you." On the other side of the room, Outer watched the integration of his counterpart and the brunette with a compassionate look. The white-haired man just let out a sigh. Suddenly Outer opened his eyes suddenly as he felt several very powerful and not at all friendly magical presences that were dangerously close to them. "Barry," he shouted, trying to warn his partner, but it was too late. A huge explosion hit the building with force, destroying a large part of it. A large curtain of smoke was formed due to the explosion. From the dust and rubble emerged several of the aspiring heroes. Luckily, Outer managed to create a geyser blaster large enough to protect those near him from the explosion. "Cough cough, is everyone okay?" the purple-eyed boy asked, emerging from the dust next to Betty. But not everyone was so lucky. "Oh my god," Momo screamed in horror. The others turned to her to see the reason why she screamed, only to stand still and horrified by the sight in front of them. Shoji, Kota, Kaminari, Aoyama, Toru, Agito, Shiro, and Jiru, all of them had not been able to protect themselves in time from the explosion, and because of this, they were crushed to death by the rubble. The companions of the recently deceased had their eyes wide open. Their friends were in front of them, lifeless. Momo couldn't bear it and fell to her knees, while rivers of tears came out of her eyes. The girl slowly made her way to her friend Jiru's body. "Jiru, please wake up, please open your eyes," the brunette begged desperately as her tears fell on her friend's faceless body. Unable to bear it any longer, Momo let out a loud cry of pain as she hugged her friend's cold corpse, at the same time bursting into tears. The others were static as they watched their vice president cry profusely over the body of her colleague and friend. Some felt that sadness and pain begin to turn into anger and hatred for the one who had attacked them. And at that moment, as if it were a play of fate, the voice of the person in charge was heard. So if quite a few of them managed to survive, well, at least I managed to kill a few." Those present instantly turned around to see how the person responsible was standing on a pile of rubble looking at them with an evil and mocking smile. Killer Izuku had arrived. Damn, the others are too far away, they won't be able to easily sense this guy's presence from outside the city. Outer thought with frustration, looking seriously at his enemy. Killer stood up, looking at those present without erasing his smile. Well, I don't want to waste time, so let's get started. At that moment horror appeared in front of both white-haired men, taking them by surprise. Both could not react in time when the boy teleported with them to another place, leaving Killer alone with a few from Class A. Let the game begin. In a burst of speed, Killer appeared in front of Kirishima with a bone in hand ready to stab him. The dyed red-haired man barely had time to use his arms as an X-shaped shield and harden them to protect himself from his enemy's attack. However, this was of little use to him. The boy felt the bone dig into his arms despite its hardness, this caused him great pain, releasing a great cry. Lita would run towards the white-haired man and using all her strength, would launch a powerful kick. However, this was useless, Killer caught the attack with one hand and used Lita's body as if forcing a bat hitting Kirishima, sending the two boys crashing into some rubble. Sato, who consumed some sugar he had, launched himself to attack the white-haired man. The boy would throw several punches which were dodged without much difficulty by his enemy. The eyeless boy just kept his mocking smile watching as the brown-haired boy continued to attack without stopping. Suddenly a blue heart appeared in front of Sato and immediately afterwards his body fell to the ground. Before the boy could react, several bones came out of the ground, passing through his body as if it were made of paper. The only thing the boy could do was spit out a huge amount of blood before taking his last breath and closing his eyes, never to open them again. But how boring. Killer sighed, placing one of his feet on the deceased boy's head and without any mercy, crushed his head as if it were nothing, spreading Sato's blood and brain cells all over the floor. The boy's classmates watched in horror as their friend died, unable to move a single finger out of fear. Some could not resist and vomited when they saw their heads being crushed. However, this only fueled the fury and hatred they had for the white-haired man. They were all about to attack when Shinii, the screaming Muslim with a terrorist complex, launched himself at full speed against the eyeless albino, propelled by his explosions. Bakugo launched a powerful explosion in Killer's face, raising a curtain of smoke. The ashen-haired man had an arrogant and half-insane smile at this, believing that he had already finished off his opponent. However, when the smoke cleared, the white-haired man was seen without a scratch and he hadn't even erased his mocking smile. The ashen-haired man was about to launch another explosion when Killer grabbed his hand and with a simple squeeze, completely destroyed it. Ayaya. The Muslim cried out in pain as he felt his entire hand broken. Before Killer could do anything, Mina shot a large amount of aceto at him. The evil Izuku was not fazed by this and with an evil smile he grabbed Bakugo by the neck and used him as a shield. Because of this the grab fell on the ashen-haired man's face, who could only scream and writhe in pain as he felt his flesh being melted by the grab. Momo, in a fit of rage over the death of her companions, attacks Killer with a sword that she created with her quirk. "Damn murderer," she screamed as tears came out of her eyes. Killer simply used a bone, easily blocking each and every one of the raven-haired girl's attacks, while he still had Bakugo held in his other hand. The white-haired man watched with a mocking smile as the girl let herself be carried away by her anger, and because of this her attacks were very clumsy and predictable. The boy, bored of this, hits Momo hard with Bakugo's body, sending them flying several meters back. He creates a Geister blaster and points it at them, ready to finish them off. Without hesitation, he shoots at the aspiring heroes. However, before the lightning strikes them, a large wall of ice appears in front of them, barely managing to resist the assassin's attack. "Another one, how nice," the white-haired man said sarcastically and boredly, but without erasing his smile. Todoroki created several ice spikes on the ground, which were dodged without any problem by Killer. The bicolor began to throw large hills of ice. Unfazed, Killer created two Geister blasters at his sides, which fired, destroying the ice as if it were paper. "Do you really think you can defeat me? You're not even a warm-up, you're just free LV." Killer's smile grew even bigger, the madness and bloodlust on his face could be seen from miles away. Todoroki didn't listen to his enemy's words and created a large pillar of ice beneath his opponent. Immediately after, when Killer was somewhat surprised by this unexpected action, he launched a large flame with all his strength, which the white-haired man received fully. "Now you're Rakashoto," shouted. "Understood," the brunette replied. While her companions distracted the white-haired boy, the brunette girl used her quirk to make many of the rubble in the area float, managing to gather many large rubble, which floated above the white-haired boy. Hearing Todoroki's order, the brunette deactivated her quirk. Immediately after, hundreds of large pieces of debris fell down the alley like raindrops on Killer's body. Surprisingly, the albino didn't move in the slightest or take any action to dodge that attack, he simply stood there with his typical macabre smile. At the moment when all the rubble hit the ground with force, all the aspiring heroes had to hold on to the ground due to a small tremor that occurred due to the impact. The teenagers coughed from the dust that was raised. Little by little everyone approached the rubble. We win? Kirishima asked as he recovered from Killer's blow. It seemed that the boys had triumphed and they could not help but feel a great joy. But in that, everyone noticed how the rubble began to move, alarming the would-be heroes. It's impossible, Mina said, terrified. Without warning, all the debris would be thrown into the air and some even hit the survivors of Class A due to the force, hurting them even more. Killer emerged from the rubble, not even a scratch on him, and the guy was even laughing. The haha tickled me. Everyone looked at him more than horrified, they hadn't even given him a bucking scratch. Killer would set his sights on Uraraka, who would be very scared by this. The albino teleports appearing in front of her and without hesitation, pierces her stomach with his bare hand almost effortlessly. The brunette fell to the floor on the verge of death, while her blood did not stop coming out. Mina and Sai would try to attack him with the slightest hope of doing even a little damage. The frog girl would kick him while Mina would attack him with her grab. Killer was unfazed by this, he easily grabbed Sayu's leg, and with a simple squeeze he completely destroyed it. Using the green-haired girl's body he would attack Tokoyami, who used his dark shadow as a kind of armor, and then shoot them both with a Geister blaster, leaving both teenagers on the verge of death. Mina would try to back away, but the white-haired genocidal man would appear behind her and break her neck, killing her instantly. Kirishima would harden as he watched his best friend being killed in front of his eyes, activating his unbreakable mode. The red-haired man, completely filled with fury and sadness, would launch an attack against Killer. He would throw blow after blow trying to damage his enemy, however he dodged everything without any problem. This only frustrated Kirishima even more. Killer, bored of this, would simply use his soul manipulation and slam the retard heart into the ground, leaving him buried in a small crater. But a certain Muslim would appear again, screaming at the top of his lungs. "Damn bastard, now I'll kill you, Shine." The genocidal white-haired man, already fed up with hearing so many screams from the unbearable Bakugo, would use his soul manipulation, stopping the ashen-haired man just a few centimeters away from him. "You really are irritating, Bakugo." Killer Midadu said coldly to the aforementioned, but still without erasing his smile. "This will be very fun," he exclaimed with a big sadistic smile. At that moment the eyeless albino would begin to repeatedly hit the Muslim against the ground. In the place you could hear the boy's screams resonating non-stop, along with the sound of his bones breaking as if they were glass. His companions wanted to go and help, but they couldn't because they were either too injured or paralyzed by fear. Killer slammed the explosive boy into the ground one last time, only for several bones to almost instantly completely pierce Bakugo's body, leaving him seriously injured, but not killing him. The boy at this point couldn't even scream due to the immense pain, all he could see was a Geister blaster charging a powerful beam of magic. Ekpelia Shen with his last strength could only mutter something. "Gee, go to hell, bucking Deku." Killer heard this but simply ignored it. Without a single shred of doubt he shot at the dying Bakugo. A gigantic explosion was caused because of this. The explosion was of such magnitude that it even shook the entire UA. However, something that Killer didn't realize was that in that last attack, by allowing himself to use enough magic, he had managed to attract the attention of a certain group of Izukus who were outside the city. When the smoke cleared, the charred and lifeless body of Katsuki Bakugo was seen. Author. It felt so good to write the damn XD. Killer, without paying attention to Bakugo's corpse, turned around and looked at the survivors who looked at him with terror and hatred. End of flashback. And that brings us to the current situation, with a few survivors of Class A looking at Killer with hatred and very injured. "I'd like to say it was fun, but that would be a huge lie," said the albino Killer. Several Geister blasters would appear behind them carrying large amounts of magic. "Game over, guys, see you later," Killer shouted with the blasters about to fire. Class A had already given up, all they could do was wait for their inevitable death at the hands of Killer. Blasters fired at point-blank range at the would-be heroes, who closed their eyes awaiting their end, which never came. These confused people opened their eyes and found themselves facing their classmate, who was protecting them with a shield made of green magic. "I'm sorry for the delay, I had some problems on the way, there was a lot of traffic." Izuku joked, looking at his companions with a smile. "Deku-kun?" Uraraka asked with difficulty and surprised, although she would swear that when she looked into the boy's eyes, she could see that in his gaze, there was no hatred directed towards her or any of her classmates, which made her happy. At least she could die happy, knowing that her old friend forgave her. The green hair watched sadly as her former friend's eyes lost all trace of shine and closed, never to open again. Knowing that it was not time for regrets, the boy fixed his gaze on Killer, who looked at him with his typical macabre smile. "We finally meet again, god of Hyperdeath," the eyeless albino said mockingly. Izuku just stared at him seriously for a few seconds before answering. "I'm not a god, I'm just a boy who wants to end all this," Izuku exclaimed seriously. At his side appeared all his other versions, Ink, Dream, Cross, Epic, Berry, Delta and Outer. Everyone looking seriously at Killer. The evil being never erased his smile. "It seems that the boss has arrived," he said, watching as a kind of black puddle formed at his side and took the shape of a completely black person, seeming to melt and looking with an evil smile at the Izukus in front of him. "Nightmare," Cross said, glaring at the newcomer. The one now known as Nightmare only widened his smile, looking at the mixed-eyed man. "Long time no see, Cross." Nightmare's voice sounded completely full of evil and mockery, almost echoing in the heads of those present. "You better go, I don't want any more deaths in the crossfire," Hyper said seriously to the aspiring heroes. Knowing that they would not help in the fight, they took their deceased friends and silently retreated, hoping that their former friend would be able to solve this problem. "Hyper, I can't sense anyone's presence around here, the heroes must have evacuated the area," Delta said to his friend. "It's better this way, that way there won't be any innocent people caught in the crossfire," the freckled man replied seriously. The green-haired man's eyes widened in shock as he saw several subjects identical to him, but with white hair, appear next to Nightmare and Killer. These being Horror, Virus, the ones he already knew, but there were two other subjects that Izuku didn't know who they were. One looked a lot like Killer, only without the red dot on his chest, and had purple eyes. Apart from having the hood of his jacket on, he was Murder Izuku. The other guy had a very strange appearance, as it seemed like his entire body was full of glitches like those in video games, apart from having tear-shaped marks under his eyes. This was Error Izuku. Izuku looked at all his other evil versions in surprise. "I can't believe it, so many evil me's," the freckled man exclaimed in surprise, looking at his evil versions. "Evil is relative." Murder with a mocking smile. "And offensive too, I answer this time, Error. I don't care what they call me." This time it was Killer's turn to speak. "TCH, pathetic." Virus exclaimed with a mocking smile. "You know, now that I have you in front of me, I want to ask you, why did you decide to attack me and my universe in particular?" The freckled man asked seriously, looking at Nightmare. The evil being just looked at Hyper without ever erasing his evil smile. "The answer is simple actually, the reason why we attacked you is not because of your great power, but because your universe, unlike the others, is the only one where there are no monsters, or a timeline similar to the others. It is also the only one where there are heroes and villains. It has almost nothing in common with the rest of the AUs. Therefore it makes it the most unpredictable universe." Nightmare's expression changed to a more serious and cold one as he released some of his dark power, "And in my future, I don't want unpredictable things," he exclaimed coldly as he released his dark power. "But Ink told me that this world also had human souls like the others," the green-haired man exclaimed doubtfully. This time Error stepped forward and spoke. "I think I can explain that. While I was researching the history and archives of this universe, I realized that the place where you discovered how to awaken your soul, in that cave, were the remains of an ancient temple where long ago human magicians practiced the use of their souls. They must have left information on how to awaken the power of the soul, so that future generations could preserve this power in case something happened to them, at least that was what I managed to discover," Error said with a completely cold and distorted voice. "But instead of falling into the right hands, that knowledge fell to you, a brat who couldn't control his resentment and who was almost absorbed by his own hatred," Nightmare exclaimed with a big evil smile. Izuku could only clench his fists. He knew that Nightmare was right, but this was not the place or time to regret. After what Nightmare said, both sides looked at each other seriously. The tension in the atmosphere was such that it could be cut with a knife. Now it was about to begin the battle that would decide not only the fate of that universe, but also the fate of the entire Scribble sphere. Chapter 23. Epic vs. Murder. A huge explosion occurred at the UA as a result of the Great Titans fight that was taking place there. Beings of great power had decided to use that place as the battlefield for the final fight. Right now we will sit in one of those battles, which sees two white-haired men, these being Epic Izuku and Murder Izuku. Both opponents, so similar to each other, but at the same time so different. Being the same person, and at the same time a completely different person. These two only share one thing. And that's it. That both possess enormous power. At this moment both enemies were in their skeletal forms as they engaged in a combat of titanic proportions. Epic had launched a powerful blow against its enemy. Murder easily blocked the blow with his forearm. The simple impact of the blow had caused a wind wave so strong that it sent several pieces of debris flying around us. The genocidal skeleton continued to block every blow that was thrown by Epic. Little by little Murder began to take a few steps back due to the constant attacks of his opponent. Epic had to quickly jump back to avoid being impaled by a large amount of bones that emerged from the ground. Both skeletons disappeared in a flash of speed, the only thing that could be seen were the waves produced due to their attacks. "I must say, this fight is kind of fun," Murder exclaimed with a mocking smile. Then, using a bone as a spear, he dealt a huge blow to Epic, sending him flying into a building. Not satisfied with that, he summoned 4 large blasters, which opened fire, destroying the building that Epic had crashed into and 3 other buildings in the process. The skeleton thought he was done with his opponent and was about to retreat. However, he felt a powerful blow to his stomach, which sent him straight to the ground, creating a small crater. The evil Izuku got up feeling a great pain in part of his stomach. He looked up and observed Epic, who only had his jacket somewhat dirty with dust, but apart from that he had no injuries. The purple skeleton looked at his evil counterpart with a wide smile, at the same time a purple flame came out of his left eye. "I must admit you are strong," Epic exclaimed, looking at the genocidal maniac with a challenging gaze. "Damn bastard," he replied with a macabre smile. The bone appeared in the purple skeleton's hand, which he used as a staff, and he quickly attacked Murder. He quickly summoned 2 bones and put them in an X shape, protecting himself from his enemy's attack. Due to the power of Epic's attack, the ground beneath us shatters into pieces. While the battle was going on, they both couldn't help but remember their respective lives and how they had gotten to where they are now. Not much was known about Epic, even Ink didn't know everything about it. In his past, Epic lived a quiet life like any other Izuku, helping the royal scientist, Dr. W.T. Hisashi, with his experiments. However, one of those days completely changed the life of that Izuku who in the future would be known as Epic. One of Hisashi's experiments failed. Even to this day, Epic is still wondering what else had come out of that experiment. But the result was that both Hisashi and Izuku had fused, forming a new being. That Izuku at the time of fusing with the Hisashi of his universe gained simply enormous power, and not only that, but he was also named the new royal scientist. However, the now Epic was not happy. Despite being the new royal scientist and the new power he possessed, he had to pay a very high price. He lost his own father. Over time the boy managed to overcome the loss of his father. As the years passed, he met Ink and discovered the existence of alternative universes. He decided to use his power to protect the other universes, knowing that there were threats not only to his world, but to everyone. He simply couldn't sit idly by knowing that he could protect them. We return to the battle and see how Epic fills his enemy Ian with a large number of bones. It should be noted that these were of a gigantic size. Murder managed to dodge most of the bones with difficulty, however a couple of them managed to hit his ribs with devastating force. Upon impact with the bones, the skeleton could feel how its ribs almost broke due to the tremendous force of the impact. "Behind you bra," Epic exclaimed behind Murder and with a large blaster. The genocidal skeleton didn't have time to react when a large and powerful beam of magic came out of the blaster and destroyed everything in its path, including him. As Epic looked at all the destruction on the battlefield, his gaze fell on a building that was barely standing in that battle. "I hope you don't mind me borrowing that building." The purple skeleton laughed. Well, with Murder, he was getting up, barely recovering from his opponent's powerful attack. "Damn, that attack really hurt, hahaha, he's really strong," he exclaimed as a big crazy smile formed on his face. The skeleton looked up as a huge building came hurtling towards him. "You've got to be kidding me," he said with a deadpan face. Murder manages to jump over the building, only for his enemy to appear behind him with his signature smile. Murder tries to hit him with a bone-like staff, but unfortunately Epic manages to dodge the attack with ease. Epic then uses his manipulation from back in Murder to even bury the skeleton's body in the ground, leaving only its head exposed. The purple skeleton begins to walk slowly to where his opponent is. "Odd, you're really causing a huge mess in this universe, bruh. You even knocked over a building like it was a rock. That's so wrong," Epic said, scolding Murder as if he were a little child. "What? But it was you who knocked down the building," the murderer exclaimed angrily. Epic simply ignored what Murder said and stomped on his head with his foot. "But don't worry, I'm not here to punish you, I'm here to kill you," he exclaimed seriously but without erasing his smile. Behind the purple skeleton appeared 3 huge blasters, but these were different from the previous ones, having a more imposing appearance. These were the big blasters. "I've never met such an annoying bastard like you in my life. What was your name?" Murder asked, sharpening his gaze on his enemy. "My name is Izuku Midoriya." At that moment the big blasters began to charge their attacks, "But you can call me Epic Izuku." At that moment the big blasters fired at the same time at the genocidal skeleton, causing a huge explosion that shook the entire city and left a good part of it destroyed. After a few seconds the explosion took place, leaving a large curtain of smoke. Epic stood there, looking at the smokescreen with his typical smile. The loud and scandalous laugh was present, accompanied by an enormous murderous instinct. Murder walked out of the cloud of smoke laughing out loud, his expression was that of a true psychopath. Ahahaha, bravo bravo, that performance was so good, it almost makes me want to have pity on you. Murder's smile reached such a degree that even his face began to deform. Both opponents disappeared in a burst of speed. The genocidal skeleton summoned hundreds of blasters which fired without hesitation at Epic. The rays of magic shone as they fell against the ground, resembling a kind of rain of light. As if they were drops of water, the attacks fell on the duel, generating large explosions that shook the entire battlefield. Epic was riding his own blaster as he flew at high speed, dodging his opponent's attacks with increasing difficulty. His power has increased, I must say that this guy is strong. The purple skeleton thought seriously as he continued flying to his enemy's position. As Epic Izuku flew on his blaster, he managed to set his sights on Murder. Looking at his epic enemy for a second, he could see behind him a pile of dust, along with several objects of his loved ones. Enji's trident. Giru's glasses. Momo's helmet and spear. Aoyama's robotic body. Hing's cake. Chloe Shoto's corpse. And Mirio's scarf. Epic saw this and became furious and decided to stop making games. At surprising speed he appeared in front of Murder and struck him with a blow that, surprisingly, the genocidal skeleton managed to dodge. Epic then received a blow to his back that sent him flying to the ground, from which many bones emerged that did manage to hurt him. TCH, bastard. Epic growled as he removed the bones that had managed to impale him. Murder appeared in front of Epic and without even letting him react, he grabbed him by the face and began dragging him across the field at high speed. Murder laughed psychopathically as he smashed his enemy's body into anything that got in his way. Everything that came into contact with Epic's body was reduced to rubble, whether large rocks or the rubble of buildings and houses. The psychopathic skeleton, still holding his opponent's face, slams him into the ground with pure brute force, creating a huge crater. Not satisfied with that, he lifted Epic's body by the head and slammed him into the ground again with even more force. All this while still smiling madly. He lifted Epic back up and repeated this process several times, cracking the ground more and more with each blow. After being beaten around for a while, Epic jumped away and then summoned hundreds of blasters just inches away from the purple skeleton's body. Epic Izuku didn't even have time to teleport. All he could see was a lot of purple lights. After that, the only thing he felt was like a huge rain of powerful attacks fell all over his body. An explosion occurred, shaking the foundations of the city. While the explosion was happening, Murder looked at this with a huge smile full of madness. He loved this feeling. The feeling of killing. That feeling brought back so many memories. Memories of his past. Memories of how he became what he is now. Before he was a normal Izuku like the rest of the Izukus that were in the multiverse. Until he was faced with a genocidal root. Their battle in the final corridor. His death at the hands of Toga. But that crazy woman didn't stop there. After that genocidal root, another one followed. And another. And another and another and another. And so the cycle was repeated hundreds of times, Toga resetting, always repeating the same genocidal route. The same route had been repeated so many times that even Toga couldn't remember how many times he had killed them all. However, what that little assassin didn't count on was that in one of those resets, Izuku gained determination. Toga never knew how he managed to gain determination. Maybe because of so many resets an error occurred that gave Izuku determination. The truth is, not even Izuku himself knew. But at the moment of obtaining the determination he knew the whole truth. And that truth was that I was trapped in an endless loop of death. He was doomed to be killed by Toga for all eternity. However, an idea had crossed that Izuku's mind, which for many could be considered nonsense and madness, even he believed it was. What if the human doesn't have enough LV to fight me? From that simple question was born the idea that would completely change the destiny of that Izuku Midoriya. Izuku began to kill all the monsters. In this way he became stronger, obtained more LV, while the human became weaker. At first he obviously felt terrible about doing this. Guilt was eating him alive. Even his guilt was reflected in horrible nightmares of the same killer's monsters. But that didn't last long. Over time the guilt disappeared. As well as his sanity. With each death the guilt disappeared and in its place began to emerge a great satisfaction in killing. He realized something. Killing it felt good. And in the end there was only one monster left to kill. His own brother Mirio Tagada. I still remembered that moment. His brother, even though he was injured, tried to help him. But not even his own brother could change his mind. At the moment of killing him he felt like a thread broke. And that thread was his sanity, the little he still had left. With the death of his brother he finally managed to obtain the power he wanted so much. And with that same power, he managed to kill Toga definitively and forever. However, the price to pay was very high. That price was his own sanity. Izuku had become a complete psychopath who loved to kill anyone who gets in his way. He had become Izuku. But an event that caused another big change in her life was when she met him. It was a day like any other in his AU, the whole place filled with the dust of his victims, and he being completely alone in that desolate place. He was sitting in Kurogiri's bar with nothing to do. When suddenly he felt it. It was an enormous dark presence that overflowed with evil. That presence was imposing and emanated great power. As if he were a shadow, he emerged from the darkness. He still remembered the words Nightmare had told him that very day. "Nice AU you have here, how's it going? You can call me Nightmare, I'll be brief, I'm a you from another universe, I'm in search of other Izuku's Midoriya who are like me, warriors of darkness who enjoy spreading chaos, you are one of them, you are a twisted mind that took everything from itself and descended into the depths of madness. But apparently not even having killed your toga are satisfied, you can't forget that feeling, right? The feeling of killing, but not the feeling of killing to protect someone or do good, no, the feeling of killing anyone who gets in your way no matter who they are. I know right now you're thinking about attacking me and killing me, but you don't because you know that not only can you not beat me, but you also know that I can offer you a lot, and yes, I come with an offer for you. I can give you the chance to travel to all the universes you want, kill as many people as you want, feel that feeling again of satisfaction at seeing the fear on their faces and begging for mercy, the feeling of killing, all I ask in return is your loyalty, what do you say, do you accept?" And now he found himself in this universe facing this version of himself. By now the answer to that question was more than obvious. Once the explosion disappeared, Epic could be seen with several wounds and his purple jacket with quite a bit of damage. The look of the little purple skeleton with Murder's psychopathic look. Seriously and coldly Epic began to speak. "You are strong, but you obtained that power in the most disgusting way possible. You abandoned your loved ones, you killed them with your own hands with the vulgar excuse of freeing them from their suffering. You do not deserve that power, you only use it to bring more pain and suffering to the AUs. No one else can face you, no one else can judge you. I will be the one to judge you here, and now in the name of all the monsters and innocent humans you killed, I will kill you right now so that the loved ones you left behind can rest in peace." Epic Izuku shouted with fury and determination as a purple flame came out of his left eye and, for the first time since the fight began, he stopped smiling. Murder, for his part, widened his horrible psychopathic smile even more at the same time that a powerful flame of dark purple fire came out of his right eye. Right now both skeletons had released their maximum power, it no longer mattered if they enjoyed the fight, their minds were completely focused on ending their opponent's life. Epic threw a strong punch at Murder, which he quickly evaded, causing his enemy to hit the ground, cracking it thanks to the impact of his fist. When Epic hit the ground, hundreds of bones of enormous eyes came out of it in the direction of Murder, creating a large line of destruction. Ha bruh. Murder would destroy the bones with a pair of blasters going against Epic, who summoned a big blaster. However, the skull was pierced by many bones by Murder just before he could execute his attack. "Oh my gosh, no my little toy," the purple skeleton exclaimed in fake pain. At that point the genocidal skeleton appeared in front of Epic and began attacking him with several bones from several different angles. Epic similarly summoned several bones, thus beginning an exchange of attacks with the bones. Murder's strength and speed increased with each attack. In his mind the only thing there was the word death. Because of this he became careless, which gave Epic the opportunity to grab him by the arm and put him in a lock to slam him hard against the ground. This only increased Murder's fury, who appeared with his teleportation behind Epic with several blasters charged at maximum power, and without hesitating for a second he fired. Just before the lightning struck Epic, he created a large wall of bones, managing to protect himself from the attack. "Damn bastard, die now," the genocidal skeleton screamed, totally enraged and desperate, beginning to attack with all his arsenal. Bones, blue bones, Geister blaster, he even used his soul manipulation to slam Epic's body into the ground and shoot himself on the spot with the blasters. And although this managed to hurt the purple skeleton quite a bit, he did not stop and continued advancing towards his enemy, getting closer and closer. "You should rest," he said in a calm and epic voice as he got closer and closer to his psychopathic counterpart who kept launching hundreds of attacks against his enemy. "After everything you've done, now you should rest." And finally it happened. Epic appeared in front of Murder Izuku. And in that moment there was no doubt or fear, only determination in Epic Izuku's eyes. Concentrating all his strength in his right fist, he gave a devastating uppercut to the genocidal skeleton. The force of the blow was such that Murder felt several bones in his body break and he was thrown into the sky. Epic, knowing that that wouldn't kill him, summoned a large bone that ended up piercing his stomach or spine since he was a skeleton, leaving him impaled on the ground. And as a final touch, several big blasters surrounded Murder's impaled body. Epic without hesitation fired with all his power against his other version. Murder, Izuku could only watch in horror and fury as enormous amounts of magic hit his body with devastating force, which began to turn to dust. Before dying and turning into dust, he was able to see something, or rather, someone. Mirio was the last thought of the psychopathic killer murder Izuku as he looked at the image of his brother with all his friends smiling at him fondly and sadly. Without him even realizing it, a sad smile appeared in his eyes and then his body ended up turning to dust. "Burn in hell, megalomaniac," Epic exclaimed, watching as his enemy's body turned to dust, leaving only his soul, which was an inverted red heart. However, something very strange happened that caught Epic's attention. Before Murder's soul disappeared or broke, a small black portal swallowed the soul, disappearing instantly. But what was that? Epic wondered as he returned to his human form. Chapter 24. Outer and Barry vs. Horror. While Epic had his battle against Murder, we can see how Outer was exchanging blows with Horror. Both were in their skeletal forms while looking at each other with extreme seriousness, although the lunatic skeleton looked with enormous bloodlust at his enemy. Both skeletons used long bones as spears to attack their opponent. The gazes of both skeletons collided with each other as they put more pressure on the bones, trying to make their opponent give in. Outer looked at his opponent with determination and at the same time with seriousness. For his part, Horror looked at the skeleton with a smile full of madness, at the same time that his eyes gave off an immense thirst for blood. Suddenly, an axe appears in the psychotic skeleton's hands, which had dried blood on it. Without a second's hesitation, Horror lashed out with a large slash at Outer. This Izuku had to step back to avoid being damaged by the axe, however he noticed how a blue heart had appeared on his chest. Instantly he turned his gaze to his opponent who looked at him with a sadistic smile. Moving his skeletal hand, Horror began to whip his enemy's body, running everything he came across. Rocks, rubble, buildings, houses, trees, all of that, and they were reduced to hundreds of pieces the moment Outer's body hit them. The evil skeleton watched with mad satisfaction as his enemy made gestures of pain as his body crashed into everything in sight. Izuku was about to continue when suddenly a voice interrupted his fun. "Don't forget me, lunatic." At the moment of hearing that voice, a powerful moment of magic fell fully upon the skeleton. Outer instantly regained control of her body, instantly recompassing herself. He saw how Barry was still in his human form while on top of a Geister blaster. Outer teleported next to his friend. "Well done," he congratulated the white-haired boy with a smile, "but this is far from over," he exclaimed seriously. From the cloud of smoke that had been generated by the boy's attack, several scarlet-red rays shot out in the direction of both of them. Quickly both Izukus dodged the attack. When the cloud of smoke cleared, they both saw how Horror was using a blaster as a shield, while two others were at his sides with their mouths glowing red. "Two against one, that's not very fair," the skeleton exclaimed with an arrogant and evil smile. "Why don't we make this a little more even?" Horror took a small bottle out of his pocket, which contained a black liquid. Outer and Barry widened their eyes in shock at this. "Stop the albino boy," shouted desperately. Outer for its part launched a large volley of bones in a desperate attempt to stop or eliminate its enemy. Horror uncorked the bottle and quickly drank all the liquid. The bones were getting closer and closer to impacting against his body. Skeleton Ice had finished drinking the dark liquid, but there was a problem. The bones were centimeters away from impacting against him. And at that moment, the large black flame covered the entire body of the skeleton and destroyed the bones until they were simple ashes. A huge shock wave came out of the flame. Outer and Barry were forced to hold on to the ground to avoid being blown away by the shock wave. Suddenly, when the expanding wave disappeared, a huge mad presence covered the entire battlefield. Barry slowly looked up, her eyes reflecting shock and fear. The dark silhouette emerged from the smoke and the remains of black fire, revealing Horror with a new look. His body was now completely black, his eyes and the inside of his mouth glowed a deep red, the hole in his skull had healed, and the most striking thing was that some parts of his body seemed to be turning into smoke. Horror was using the same transformation he used with Hyper in their first encounter. But what?" Barry tried to say, but her voice just wouldn't come out. The pressure emitted by the dark skeleton's body was enormous. "Let the show begin," Horror said with a big smile full of madness and bloodlust. The dark skeleton appeared in front of Barry in the blink of an eye. Outer watched in fear as his friend was thrown out due to a massive blow he received from Horror in the middle of his stomach. The albino child crashed into a house, which conveniently collapsed on top of him. Outer barely had time to react when his enemy attacked him with his axe. Using a long bone as a spear, the skeleton defended itself from its enemy's attack. Horror did not give up there, pretending to firmly grip his axe, he began to launch hundreds of attacks against his enemy, each blow was carried with great force. The blows of Horror's axe were so strong that they destroyed Outer's spear bone in one blow, so he quickly created another one and used it to block another attack. However, the result was the same, the bone broke into pieces and he had to create another one. They both stayed like that for a few seconds. With Horror throwing blow after blow with his axe and Outer summoning more and more bones to defend himself. The dark skeleton, fed up with this, created a sharp pointed bone and tried to stab his enemy. Outer had to dodge the thrust by taking a great leap backwards. But the battle cry Horror appeared in front of him trying to stab him again. However, Outer used the bone he had in his hands to deflect the attack and then jumped upwards, revealing a large Geister blaster charging its magic. The skull fired a huge beam of energy at the dark skeleton. Unfazed by this, Horror gripped his axe firmly. "This is nothing," he shouted, throwing a powerful blow with his axe. Surprisingly, the axe attack managed to split the blaster in half, several black bones emerged from under the blaster and completely destroyed it. Using his teleportation, Horror appeared in front of an unsuspecting man. Finally, the dark skeleton had dealt a lethal blow to the enemy. Without stopping there, he continued to throw several blows either with his axe or with bones that drew energy from the earth or from some other angle. Outer, despite his injury, did not give up and continued attacking with everything he had. Horror raises his axe high and unleashes a deadly blow at his enemy. Outer, for its part, summons a large wall of bones to defend itself. The psychopathic skeleton's axe hits the wall of bones, breaking several of them. Both opponents look at each other with determination, neither was going to give in, not until the other's life was over. After struggling for a while, they both jump back and separate. Already at a more or less decent distance, both skeletons were panting somewhat tired, especially Outer, who was holding the wound on his torso. After a few seconds, Horror smiles mockingly at his opponent. Outer lets out a sigh while giving his classic smile. With some difficulty he stands up. "I must say that you are very strong," said the skeleton in the blue jacket. "It's a shame that we are in this situation. Maybe you would have been a good friend." Friends with someone like you? Don't make me laugh, you little meat." Horror exclaimed as he stood up with a huge, insane grin. Both skeletons stared at each other in silence. Suddenly, one of the rubble from a house falls to the ground, creating a large curtain of smoke. Despite this, the skeletons did not appear fazed, they still kept their gaze fixed on their opponent. "Could you remind me your name?" Outer asked seriously. "Horror Izuku Midoriya, from the Horror Tale universe." He answered without importance while the insane smile on his face did not disappear. With that said, Horror grabbed his axe, Outer grabbed a bone spear, and without a second's hesitation, they both launched themselves at full speed against each other, seeking to end their enemy's life. Both attacks hit, generating a shock wave that raised a smoke screen. Little by little it dissipated, revealing the result of that clash. Outer was buried in the ground with several wounds. Horror looked with a new evil eye at the state of his enemy. "This is over," he exclaimed as he raised his axe high, ready to deliver the final blow. However, something stopped him. Just before Horror's axe hit Outer, a bone hit the dark skeleton, sending him flying several meters, only for another bone to hit his back and sink him into the ground. Horror Izuku quickly recovered, standing up as he looked at the person responsible for the attack. The culprit was none other than Barry, who was in his skeletal form, his left eye glowing blue, and with two spear-like bones in each hand. The now skeleton looked at Horror with great fury and small tears at the edge of his eyes. Edto gave Outer enough time to stand up, who now looked at his friend in surprise. Damn, I forgot about the brat." Horror growled angrily. "Are you proud of everything you're doing here?" the younger skeleton asked angrily. "I know there are timelines where all my friends and I are suffering, but I'm not going to let you ruin this universe just because. Let me guess, you're frustrated, hurting others, which won't heal whatever happened to you." As he said that, the dark skeleton's eyes widened as he began to remember life in his AU. The Horror Tale universe. It was one of the darkest alternate universes of all, its very name indicated it. A universe where General Momoyasu Rozu had taken the throne after a neutral route. During his reign, things underground became increasingly worse. The core had broken down, magic was beginning to run low, and as a result the monsters began to suffer horrible deformations, but the worst thing was the lack of food. In this way the queen established a new law. Every human who falls into the underground must be killed to serve as food. At first he tried to negotiate with the queen to get that stupid law gone. That stupid attempt ended up causing a permanent fatal wound to his skull. The scar. The moment he felt the spear piercing his skull, something inside him broke his sanity. After that, Izuku himself had accepted the new law that reigned underground. Be to be eaten. That was how it was for a long time, until she met him. A being that gave off so much evil and hatred that it was impossible not to fear him. Nightmare Izuku. He offered to join him so that he can feast on the flesh of different humans from different universes. He didn't have to think about it much, it was a very tempting offer and he no longer had any sanity left. And now here he is, fighting in a universe he doesn't know against a pair of alternate versions of himself. I want to help you. Suddenly Barry's voice brought horror out of his thoughts, but I can't believe in you, he exclaimed seriously. Somehow. Brat. He reminded him a lot of his brother Mirio, who despite the horrible situation in the basement, remained the same. Shaking his head to clear away those stupid thoughts, the dark skeleton's annoyed gaze fell upon his enemy. Suddenly Barry teleported in front of horror and before he could react, several bones came out of the ground. Just when the bones were millimeters away from piercing through, the dark skeleton teleported away from them, only to have to block several blows from Barry, who attacked him with two bones that acted like spears. Horror would throw an axe, which Barry would dodge with his teleportation. Immediately after the dark skeleton received a blow in the middle of the stomach from a bone that came out of the ground, another bone hit him in the back, sending him flying away. He stopped his advance by sticking his axe into the ground. Royal guards, they're all the same. He growled in annoyance as he picked up his axe from the ground and glared at Barry. The skeleton was standing on a huge bone several meters above its enemy. Several sharp-pointed bones appeared on Barry's sides, all pointing at horror. From 1 second to the next all the bones would be thrown at high speed towards horror. Starting to run at high speed, the psychopathic skeleton skillfully dodged all the bones. When he was close enough he made a great leap and with his axe, he cut the bone on which Barry was standing. The smaller skeleton growled, looking annoyed at his enemy, who smiled mockingly at him. As they both fell to the ground, horror summoned a large number of black bones, which began to attack Barry from all possible angles, causing many injuries, despite the fact that he covered himself with his arms in an X shape. In a swift act, Barry would take one of those bones and teleport it in front of horror, managing to give him a large cut on his face. The dark skeleton screamed in pain feeling the wound. Horror turned around, glaring at his enemy, who was panting due to his wounds and exhaustion. You're not the first of your kind, he exclaimed as he dropped the black bone, which vanished into ashes. You abuse the other alternate universes because you can't be happy in your own, right? He asked, giving horror a compassionate look. For a second the skeleton's murderous gaze changed to one that reflected sadness. Horror could have sworn he saw the image of the skeleton in front of him change to that of his younger brother Mirio, before all the disaster cheered by Momo's reign. He quickly pushed those thoughts out of his head, there was no turning back since his sanity disappeared, and he agreed to join Nightmare. You're just a piece of code with a defined story, anything you say doesn't interest me. But the war cry horror teleported in front of Barry and taking him off guard, he concentrated all his strength and in that. Slash. The psychopathic skeleton's axe had caused a fatal wound in Barry's stomach and a large amount of blood began to flow from the wound. The younger skeleton took a couple of steps back while holding his abdomen in great pain. Barry fell to the ground breathing heavily as his blood stained his blue gloves, dyeing them red. The little skeleton's vision was blurry due to lack of energy. All he could see was Horror's back, which was walking away from the battlefield. Barry could feel his strength slowly fading away. As he watched Horror leave, he couldn't help but remember his entire life. How he grew up underground with his brother Mirio, how he always strove to be a royal guard. How, thanks to Toga, they had broken the barrier and freed all the monsters. I still had a lot of things to do. He had to get back to his family and friends. He was not going to die here. I wasn't going to die being a useless person. With all his strength he stood up while letting out moans of pain. I hope you're ready, Barry, this fight isn't over. Outer said appearing next to his friend. The younger skeleton gave his friend a determined look. Now the final round began. Both skeletons launched themselves at full speed towards Horror. Who upon sensing the magical presences of both turned around, only to see how both skeletons invited thousands of sharp-pointed bones in his direction. Outer and Barry threw the bones at Horror, who using his axe, managed to deflect them, only for him to instantly have to create a wall of bones to defend himself from a pair of blasters. Barry appeared in front of him trying to stab him with a bone, however the attack was deflected by Horror's axe. The dark skeleton found himself surrounded by a large number of blasters, which fired at him at close range. Horror barely had time to cover himself with walls of bones. The skull rays generated a large smoke screen, which dissipated when Horror left thanks to a great jump. He teleported, dodging a stab from Barry. The attacks of both skeletons were getting faster and faster. Hundreds of bones came out of the ground towards Horror, who could barely dodge them due to the enormous amount of attacks. Outer rose into the sky, summoning a massive amount of Geister blasters, which shone in the sky, as if they were beautiful stars in the deepest darkness of space. Horror froze as he watched a massive amount of blasters in the sky. He was about to teleport, however something happened. The blue heart appeared in front of his chest. The next thing he felt was how an invisible force crashed him with great force against the ground, from which a large number of bones came out, but these were different from the previous ones, since they were a bright blue color. I can't move, the psychopathic skeleton thought in terror. From his position he could see how Barry had her hand extended towards him, which is surrounded by a blue glow. Now Outer Barry shouted at the top of her lungs. At this all the blasters fired at the same time, fusing their data into a much larger one. The last thing Horror asked to see was how the gigantic attack fell on his body, and then he felt indescribable pain. And finally it happened. Horror's HP reached 0. Little by little Horror's body was turning into dust even while still inside the ray. When Horror's body disappeared, only an inverted black heart remained. It was swallowed by a dark portal before the other two realized. Outer's blasters slowly stopped firing and then disappeared. The boy returned to his human form and fell to the ground, exhausted from the battle. We did it. The white-haired man said with a smile. However, when Outer laid his gaze on his friend he felt fear and despair wash over him. Haha, looks like I've reached my limit. Barry was turning to dust. Barry Outer screamed in horror as he struggled to his feet and ran straight towards his friend. Please tell my brother that I will always love him. These were the last words of the younger skeleton before he turned to dust and his soul shattered into pieces just as his friend was inches away from touching him. Outer fell to his knees as he watched the dust of his once friend disappear into the air. Barry, I'm sorry. Outer said before breaking into a heart-wrenching cry of helplessness. Chapter 25. Delta and Cross vs. Virus. In a part of the city, which was already in a deplorable state at this point, a skeleton with orange gauntlets could be seen delivering powerful blows to another skeleton with a somewhat unusual appearance. Virus was in his skeletal form as he dodged Delta's devastating blows. Thanks to the soul of Valencia that could Delta, his blows were much more powerful than most of Izuku's, apart from being one of the best in terms of hand-to-hand combat. The skeleton launches a powerful blow against Virus, who dodges it, only to realize that in front of him, there was a large Geister blaster. Barely having time to cover himself with his arms, he is sent flying due to the attack, only for Cross to appear behind him with a blaster, firing without hesitation at his enemy. This time Virus was able to react in time, managing to dodge the magic beam thanks to his teleportation. Taking advantage of the fact that Cross's guard was down, Virus appears behind the black and white skeleton and grabs him by the head, crashing him into the ground. The moment Cross's body hit the ground, it trembled slightly due to the force of the impact, while a cloud of smoke rose. Virus had to teleport to dodge a bone attack from Delta, which was aimed at his head. Cross stood next to his friend as they both looked seriously at their enemy. Are you okay, buddy? The orange skeleton asked while in battle pose. It was just a scratch, I'm determined enough to continue. He replied while summoning a huge sword-like knife. Virus for his part created several blasters on his sides, without hesitating for a second he began to shoot at point-blank range at his enemies. Both skeletons would use their teleportation to dodge the blaster's rays. Cross would appear in front of Virus and launch a large slash with his knife, destroying the Geister blasters. The skeleton would cover itself with a wall of bones, managing to emerge unscathed from the attack. However, he was unable to react when Delta appeared in front of him to grab him by the face and slam him against the ground with brutal force. Not satisfied with that, he would lift him up, still holding him by the face, and try to slam him against the ground again. But before he could make his move, Virus teleported away from his enemy. For his part, Cross took advantage of the rubble at the site to stealthily approach his enemy. Once close, he firmly takes hold of his large knife sword and launches a large cut towards his enemy's neck. A big mistake. Using his long tail, Virus manages to block the skeleton's attack and grabs him by the neck, throwing him into the air as if he were a sack of potatoes. Taking advantage of this, he summons several blasters and fires at Cross. He wasn't going to have time to dodge the attack. Fortunately for him, Delta appeared in front of him and created two large blasters and used them as a shield to protect them both. Once both skeletons have recompassed themselves, they prepare their counterattack. They both decide to go in opposite directions to attack Virus. Delta goes on the right, while Cross goes on the left. Using his knife, Cross manages to land a couple of cuts on Virus's body, but these are not that serious, being mostly simple superficial cuts. Recovering from the attack, the skeleton launches a brutal slash with its claws at its enemy. Cross takes the hit and falls to the ground. Just before Virus launched another attack, he was forced to dodge a powerful blow from Delta. Both Virus and Delta would begin to exchange a large number of blows, although Delta was shown to have the advantage due to her physical abilities. By jumping back, the skeleton with a tail and claws would manage to dodge a bone attack from a recovered Cross. Using his digital wings, Virus would rise into the sky, while many blasters would appear at his sides. Seeing this, Cross and Delta create their respective blasters. And at that moment the three skeletons would shoot without hesitation. In that section of the city you could see a large amount of lights going in all directions as a result of the battle between these three skeletons. The battle of full magic rays had broken out in that part of the city. For his part, Virus uses his digital wings to dodge the rays that were headed his way, however, in a moment of carelessness, he did not see them coming for a while, and they ended up hitting him in the face. The lightning strike slightly disorients the flying skeleton, which quickly recovers. While the blasters kept firing, Virus decides to use his threads and grabs a large piece of rubble. Without hesitating for a second he throws it with great force at both skeletons. Cross sees how the great rubble falls towards them, he takes a great leap, and using his great knife, he makes a slash, splitting the rubble in half, only to find Virus in front of him, who grabs him by the neck and brutally slams him against the ground. Before he can do anything, a blue bone pierces Virus's arm without hurting him. Seeing that bone, the skeleton remains still for a second, which is taken advantage of by Delta, who gives him a powerful uppercut, sending him flying into some rubble. Virus stood up while holding his right arm. The blow he had received from Delta was much stronger than he expected, to the point that his arm had broken. With no other option, he decides to use his ace up his sleeve. From one of his pockets he takes out what appears to be a small bottle with a black liquid inside. Cross and Delta see this and instantly panic. "That's Hate the skeleton with a big knife," cried out in amazement and fear. Both skeletons launch a large wave of bones at Virus. With the bottle already uncovered, Virus drinks the dark liquid as quickly as possible. And just when the bones were just a centimeter away from impacting with his body, a large black flame covered the evil Izuku's body and destroyed his bones, turning them into ashes. Both Cross and Delta had to hold on to the ground to avoid being blown away by the shockwave generated by the burst of power. When the dark flame disappeared, Virus's new appearance could be seen. His clothes had turned into negative colors, his skin turned black as night, his mouth radiated a scarlet red color, some marks appeared in his sky blue eyes as if they were tears, his eyes were now three colors, these being red, sky blue and green, but the most striking thing was that his wings had become a kind of crimson red tentacles with many ones and zeros. Now Virus emanated a much greater power than before, a great amount of dark power was felt in the air. Cross and Delta stared in shock at the new Virus as they felt cold sweat run down their foreheads. "This is bad," Delta said, a little nervously. "Oh wow, I hadn't realized, thanks so much for stating the obvious, Sherlock," Cross commented with a frown at his friend. "Later we can discuss all you want, now we have to beat this guy," exclaimed the orange skeleton. The skeletons would refocus on the fight and create a huge amount of blasters, double the number before. All the lightning would fall like rain on the dark skeleton. Due to the constant attacks a large smoke screen would rise. After almost a minute of constant attacks they would both stop. "Do you think that worked?" Delta asked seriously. "I highly doubt it, it would be too easy," Cross replied, watching as the smokescreen slowly dissipated. When the smoke disappeared completely, it was possible to see how Virus had protected himself with a huge black Gaster blaster. The blaster would disappear, showing Virus, who did not have a single scratch. "It's my turn," evil Izuku said coldly. Virus teleports in front of Cross and delivers a devastating blow. The skeleton could feel his jaw almost break at the new strength of his enemy, it seemed that he had become twice as powerful. In a quick movement, Cross uses his soul control and sends Virus flying through a half-destroyed house. The dark skeleton's body crashes into the structure, which collapses on top of it. Both skeletons summon 5 blasters each on top of the house and open fire, causing a huge explosion that shakes the battlefield. Suddenly, footsteps echo across the battlefield. Virus emerges from the rubble completely unharmed, the attack having done absolutely nothing to him. At an abysmal speed, the dark skeleton plunges his fist into Delta's stomach. Cross is left in shock as he watches his friend being thrown out by the brutal blow. Using his teleportation, Virus appears behind him, a skeleton with a soul of bravery, and gives him a strong blow with his sharp tail. The blow is fatal. The skeleton lets out a cry of pain due to the blow. Quickly recompassing himself, he spins on his own axis to launch a blow at Virus. To the surprise of both Cross and Delta himself, the evil skeleton stopped the blow with a single hand. "You're going to have to try a little harder than that," he said with an evil grin. Suddenly Virus was forced to separate from Delta as a large amount of sharp bones headed towards his position. Cross returns to the battle to help his friend. With his knife in hand he runs at full speed against Virus, who uses 2 long bones as batons. The black and white skeleton launches a vertical slash against its enemy, however the attack was easily assessed by one of Virus's bones. Virus would give Cross a strong knee to the stomach and then grab him by the arm and slam him against the ground with enormous force, creating a small crater. The skeleton turned around to dodge a blow from Delta. Both skeletons begin a hand-to-hand combat. Delta threw extremely strong punches. It is worth noting that his gauntlet seemed to glow with an orange light. For his part, Virus dodged and counterattacked all of his enemy's blows. His new power had helped him get one level above his enemy. Little by little Virus begins to show advantage over the orange skeleton. His blows begin to be faster and stronger. This forces Delta to back off. Virus kicks him with all his might in the stomach, causing Delta to double over in pain. Taking advantage of his enemy's low guard, he uses his tentacles and begins to strangle him by the neck. "It's over," the dark skeleton said with enormous coldness. Suddenly a huge amount of crimson-red rays came out of the tentacles and electrocuted Delta. The skeleton screamed in agony as he felt electricity run through every corner of his body. After a few seconds Virus stopped and dropped his enemy's lifeless body to the ground. The evil Izuku indifferently observed his enemy's body. Suddenly he turned around as he watched Cross stand up. Although he was already having difficulty standing up, his magic reserves were running out and his wounds from the previous attacks were taking their toll on him. This battle isn't over yet unless my body and soul turn to dust. I will keep fighting, no matter if all my bones turn to dust. I got up again, because I'm determined not to let you pass, the skeleton shouted, his gaze burning with determination. Summoning his knife again, Cross launched a blast of red energy at his opponent. Virus didn't even bother to move, he simply created a wall of bones to defend himself. When the wall disappeared, the dark skeleton saw his enemy standing in front of him with his knife in hand. Throwing a slash, which was easily dodged by Virus, Cross attacked twice more. The first blow was dodged again, while the second was easily stopped by Virus with a single hand. However, Cross did not give up and applied much more force, managing to push Virus back several meters. Several bones emerged from the ground, taking the dark skeleton by surprise and raising it several meters above the ground. Not content with that, Cross created a large blaster right above his enemy. Just before the beam hit him, Virus created his own blaster and fired it while remaining static in the air with the help of his wings. Both rays hit each other, generating several wind currents. When both skulls disappeared, Cross teleported in front of Virus, launching a slash with his knife, which was stopped by a bone of his enemy. "Not bad, but you'll have to try harder if you want to get out alive," evil Izuku commented coldly. Cross smiled mockingly at this as he launched another attack with his knife, which was dodged by Virus. The black and white skeleton once again launched a blast of energy from his knife. This attack was useless since Virus used a blaster as a shield. When Cross hit the ground, he found himself trapped by dozens of blue bones. The skeleton watched as hundreds of blasters surrounded him while charging large amounts of magic. "Aim over Cross." Saying that, all the rays hit Izuku head-on, generating a huge explosion that shook the battlefield. Virus watched coldly as the cloud of smoke cleared after his attack, revealing an extremely injured Cross lying on the ground. "You put up a good fight, you kept me entertained quite a bit, but this is the end," the dark skeleton said coldly. Suddenly a noise reached Virus's ears, he instantly turned his gaze towards where Cross's dust was supposed to be. And there he saw it. Cross, despite his injuries, had stood up once again. "Give up? How do you plan to continue fighting in your current state?" he asked as he looked at a dying Cross who was approaching him with extremely slow steps. "My attacks have reduced your HP to less than 0. It's only a matter of time before you turn into dust. This fight is over, you can't use magic anymore, and your bones are almost dust. In other words, you're already dead." Cross ignored his enemy's words as he walked through the agonizing pain. Once he arrived in front of Virus, he could barely raise his fist to strike his opponent. However, the force was so weak that Virus didn't even bother to dodge it. The blow was like that of a small child, it didn't even manage to move or disturb the skeleton. With no energy left, Cross could no longer stand and fell back onto the ground with a thud. Virus looked at this with indifference before turning around and slowly walking away from his dying enemy. "Goodbye, your life has come to an end," Virus exclaimed. "I'm not afraid." Virus turned around again, watching as Cross stood up again, but this time with much more difficulty. "I'm not afraid because I have nothing to lose. My universe disappeared because of me. All my friends and family that were there are dead. I am the legacy of this tale universe. I failed to protect my universe, but I will not fail this one. The value of this is something someone like you will never be able to understand. I was trained to be a royal guard to protect others. At least I must do something," Cross said with great effort while his body trembled due to the pain joining them. Yes, being useless would be a shame. Cross would once again summon his huge knife, only now there was a small difference. Cross's knife would begin to emit a blinding scarlet red light. The light was so strong that even Virus himself had a little trouble seeing. "I will use all my magic, honoring the determination I inherited from this tale universe," he shouted as his knife glowed even brighter. "This is my last knife." With a shout full of determination, crossed through the huge knife, which was shining scarlet red, at Virus with all his might. The dark skeleton easily dodged the weapon by turning his head to the side. "Pathetic," he whispered in disappointment. "But in that. Finish him, Delta." Virus opened his eyes in horror upon hearing Cross's phrase. He immediately turned around, but it was too late. There, in front of him was Delta, his body glowing orange as he gripped Cross's knife with all his might. Using not only his will, but also Cross's will and determination, the orange skeleton raised a scarlet knife high, and finally. Priam Pam 999,999. Delta had cut Virus from his left shoulder to his waist, ending by splitting the dark skeleton in two. One hit. With just one hit, Virus's HP had reached 0. "How can this be possible?" was the last thing the evil Izuku said before both parts of his body turned to dust. When this happened, only an inverted black and light blue heart remained floating in the air. Before being swallowed by a small black portal. Delta fell to his knees, returning to his base form as he dropped the knife. The battle had left him extremely tired, but he still had something to do. Cross Delta looked up, searching for his friend. Only to be met with the horrifying sight of the wind carrying away the dust of what was once a great friend and warrior. Delta tried with all his might to hold back his tears, he didn't want to, but the pain was too much, he had to shout his friend's name and get no answer, but he didn't care anymore. Bruce. The skeleton could not bear it any longer and burst into heartbreaking tears at the death of his friend while he looked at the knife on the ground. His friend's knife. Chapter 26. Hyper vs Killer. While all the other battles were taking place, in the middle of the city, a fight was taking place between a white-haired man with goat horns and purple clothes with white details. This was Hyper Izuku, who was in his god form. The white-haired man brandished two white sabers against his enemy. A simple-looking skeleton, he had black shorts with white lines on the sides, a white shirt with a blue jacket, but his most notable features were, first, a strange bright red spot on his chest, and second, the fact that a kind of black liquid came out of his eye sockets in the form of tears. The skeleton blocked his enemy's attack with his real knife, while in his free hand appeared a knife made of crimson red magic. Using this knife, Killer launched a vertical attack against his enemy. Izuku blocked the attack with his other saber. They both began to struggle while staring at each other intensely. As the white-haired man stared directly into his enemy's empty eye sockets, he couldn't help but ask himself a question. If he had continued on his path of hate, could he have ended up like him, like Killer? Seeing his enemy, what Izuku actually saw was a kind of dark reflection. What could have happened to him? That simple idea terrified him. Could it really have ended like this? At that moment he was glad to have left that path. Both enemies jumped apart, staring at each other. Izuku looked at him seriously. While on the other hand, Killer looked at him with a sadistic and evil smile. "You know, I must say that you are someone very interesting," Killer said, slightly drawing the white-haired man's attention. "It's the first time I've seen an Izuku like you, I mean one with 8 different types of souls, you even have hatred like me." The skeleton's big, macabre smile made Izuku a little uneasy, but he wasn't going to back down. It will be an interesting experience, I want to see what it feels like to kill someone with so much power. After finishing listening to what his other version said, a smile of excitement appeared on the boy's face. Well, I can't lie either, this fight is kind of exciting me, but don't think I'll let you live, you represent a great danger not only to this universe, but to all the others, I'm not going to let you get out of this battle alive," he said as he prepared his sabers and got into a combat stance. "This is going to be a very exciting battle," Killer exclaimed, smiling evilly. Izuku raises one of his hands, causing several warning signs to appear below and around Killer. The skeleton teleported away from the signs, only to see how in those exact places lightning bolts of magic fell with great force, generating a powerful rumble on the battlefield. The evil Izuku would use his knife and launch several energy waves against his rival. Whitehair makes a star appear in front of him, using it as a shield, managing to protect himself from attacks. In a burst of speed he would appear in front of Killer and deliver a strong kick, forcing his enemy to cover himself with his arms. As Killer resisted the blow, he looked at his enemy and smiled maliciously. Izuku steps back and summons some sort of cannon, beginning to fire a large number of magic bullets, as if it were a machine gun. The skeleton begins to run towards his opponent while dodging the bullets, at the same time destroying some of them with his knife. Managing to reach where Hyper was, the skeleton gives him a strong blow to the chest. Due to the blow, the white-haired man drops his weapon, which disappears into particles of light. Due to the impact, Hyper takes a few steps back, but does not fall. He decides that it is better to use his long-range attacks. And that makes. Several warning signs appear below Killer, who notices them instantly and moves from the spot, beginning to dodge a large rain of powerful lightning. Izuku spreads his hands and a large amount of stars made of magic begin to fall from the sky. Pillar creates a Geister blaster and shoots it at one of these stars, destroying it completely. A big mistake. The instant the star is destroyed, it splits into dozens of smaller stars, which take the skeleton by surprise, who receives some of these hits, losing a bit of his HP. This enrages Killer, who firmly grabs his knife and teleports in front of his enemy and delivers a fatal cut to his chest. Izuku, upon receiving the attack, lets out an immense scream of pain. Blood begins to flow from his wound, staining his purple tunic a deep red. Suddenly the white-haired boy watched in astonishment as many blasters appeared in front of him, which began to charge a large amount of magic. Killer, with a big smile full of evil, launches one of his main attacks. Dozens of magic rays fall directly on the freckled boy's body. Izuku, feeling the powerful attack's impact against his body, lets out a tremendous cry of pain. But in that, "I'm not going down that easily," Izuku shouted, and the boy's body was surrounded by a green aura. Using the power of the soul of kindness, he begins to heal his wounds. Killer is stunned when he sees this, but at the same time he smiles with excitement. "That's good to know, it would be very boring if you died so quickly," the evil skeleton exclaimed with a sadistic smile. Once standing, Izuku summons the same weapon as before, but this time something different happens. The weapon's pinpoint opens wide, and from it comes out a huge ray of magic that falls squarely on Killer's body, who was not expecting that action from his enemy. An extremely powerful attack that forces him back several meters, but does not knock him down. Killer fights back, this time with more blasters than before. The fight has become an exchange of magic bolts. Both opponents use their long-range attacks. Killer with his Geister blaster. And Hyper with his lightning and magic stars. They were both very evenly matched, however a slight advantage could be seen on the part of the white-haired man. At one point Izuku manages to corner Killer, taking advantage of this he summons his weapon again and launches another magic blast of surprising magnitude. Using his teleportation, the dark skeleton evades the attack and reappears on top of a half-destroyed building. The boy manages to spot his opponent and quickly flies towards his position, arriving in a matter of seconds. Izuku, standing in front of his enemy, summons his two sabers again and lunges towards the skeleton to attack it. Reacting quickly, Killer manages to evade the white-haired man's stab by stepping aside and taking advantage of the proximity, he uses his knife and manages to stab the white-haired man's left eye. Izuku screams in pain at this and falls face first against the edge of the building before falling into the void. Just before he hits the ground, he manages to get up and begins to float. The boy wipes the blood from his eye and, using the green soul again, heals his wound and regenerates with the soul of hatred. Once recovered from his wound, Izuku begins to fly. Killer watched everything, especially looking with anger at how he regenerated. Hyper is furious, he flies directly towards his opponent, at great speed he grabs him by the neck and begins to lift him into the air. Once they both reached a really considerable height, the white-haired man begins to spin on his own axis. Killer does everything possible to free himself from the grip on his neck, his attempts being in vain. But the strength he had gained from the spins, Izuku throws Killer to the ground at enormous speed. From a great height and at high speed, the skeleton plummets onto the rubble of the battlefield. The clash is so strong that the entire city shook due to the impact, even the other Izukus in the other fights felt the city shake slightly. "We are facing a simply brutal fight." Killer slowly gets up, he was a little dizzy due to the impact. The damage from the fall was too much even for him. Hyper would not let his enemy rest, he would summon his weapon again and fire the great beam of magic again. The skeleton managed to see how the attack was quickly coming towards him, with one jump he managed to dodge this attack. However, he noticed that a warning sign had appeared right where he was. Without being able to react, a bolt of magic falls right on his body. Killer screams in pain, feeling the powerful attack lower his HP. Killer Izuku. LV 20. HP 56 70 99 99. Hyper descends from the sky and lands in front of the skeleton while looking at it seriously. Killer glares at his opponent, but the latter immediately puts on a smile. I must admit that blow did hurt. You managed to make me lower my guard for a second, and I congratulate you for that. The skeleton commented while holding his neck. How did he do it? Not even the author knows. But don't let it go to your head. There's still a long way to go before this battle ends. The skeleton took a small vial with a black liquid out of his pocket. Izuku opened his eyes in shock as he saw and instantly recognized the contents of that small vial. "I won't allow it," the white-haired man shouted in alarm as he summoned one of his lightning bolts. The magic attack fell rapidly in the direction where Killer was. The skeleton had already uncovered the jar and was drinking its contents. When the lightning was about to hit its target, the inevitable happened. The large black flame came out of the body of the psychopathic skeleton. Said flame was so powerful that it destroyed and dissipated the lightning, while raising a large curtain of smoke. When the smoke cleared, Killer's new appearance could be seen. The change itself was not very big, his clothes were now completely black, from his eye sockets, instead of that black liquid coming out, now it seemed that he was crying blood. In one of his eye sockets you could see a crimson red point, which shone intensely next to a small blood red flame, but the most striking thing was that on his sides, there were 2 Geister blasters. Only these had a slightly wilder appearance, now they had 4 eyes, and they seemed to be made of red energy. You better be ready, because this is the final round. The new killer said with a huge smile full of madness. The dark skeleton raised his hand, and one of the blasters at his sides opened its mouth, and a gigantic beam of crimson red magic shot out towards his enemy at enormous speed. Izuku managed to narrowly dodge the powerful attack, which continued on until it hit a building, reducing it to nothing more than ashes. The evil skeleton lets out a grunt of annoyance. The green hair summons his 2 sabers again and lunges at Killer again. One of the blasters moves on its own and tries to bite Izuku. The boy dodges the bite, surprised by what happened. Apparently, thanks to the power of Hate's magic, those 2 blasters had acquired some self-awareness, becoming a kind of minions at Killer's service. Returning to focus on the fight, the white-haired man gives him a strong cut on the left blaster. Killer tries to attack the boy, but he doesn't let him and causes a bolt of magic to fall between them. The glare of the attack momentarily blinds the dark skeleton. The assassin reacts and with a quick movement one of his blasters lunges at Izuku and with a ferocious bite, manages to tear a piece of flesh from Izuku's chest. White hair begins to bleed out and his enemy does not give him enough time to heal. This fight is turning into a slaughter. The boy reacts and instantly walks away. Killer advances quickly towards his enemy. Izuku raises one of his hands and throws a huge magic star at the dark skeleton. The attack hits him head-on, infuriating him even more. The skeleton in a burst of speed appears in front of Izuku, dealing a devastating blow to his stomach, knocking all the air out of him. Taking advantage of the white-haired boy's carelessness, Killer's blasters pounce on the boy and bite both of his arms, sinking their sharp teeth into his flesh. Izuku screamed in pain as he felt the blaster's teeth reach even his bones. The blasters separate from the boy, and before he could react, both skulls fire a huge beam of magic at the same time right into his face. The white-haired man takes the full brunt of the attack, pushing him until he crashes into the roof of a building. Killer uses his teleportation to appear in front of his enemy, however he didn't count on something, and that was that they were both in the same building as before. The skeleton looks at his rival, who is at the edge of the building, and without a second's hesitation, he lunges at him again. Izuku arms himself with his 2 sabers and with a powerful slash, destroys one of the blasters. Furious Killer creates a magic knife and begins to launch a large number of punches and stabs against his enemy. The white-haired man skillfully dodged all of the skeleton's attacks. The skeleton used one of his sabers to launch a strong slash, followed by several magic spheres, which hit Killer directly, making him retreat and destroying the last blaster he had left. The dark skeleton, enraged by the attack, violently lunges at its opponent. Izuku instantly firmly grabs his 2 sabers, and once Killer was about to attack him, he stabs both sabers into both arms of the psychopathic skeleton. The evil Izuku screams terrifyingly in pain. In an act of extreme flexibility, the white-haired man clings to the edge of the building, while Killer, due to the pain, could not stop in time and falls from the large building, hitting the ground directly. This is the perfect opportunity for Izuku. The boy summons 2 more sabers and throws them directly at Killer. The sabers go through both of the skeleton's legs, impaling him on the ground. He is trapped. Taking advantage of the fact that his enemy cannot move, Izuku positions himself on the edge of the building, summons his weapon again, aims and shoots at point-blank range at Killer's body. The skeleton screams in pain, feeling the bullets hitting him. Killer Izuku. LV 20. HP 46 90 99 99. Killer's HP was beginning to drop rapidly due to the constant attacks, but not enough. Hyper, seeing that this would not be enough to kill his enemy, decides to use 100% of his God mode. Several warning signs appear beneath Killer's body as instantly powerful bolts of magic begin to rain down upon the Killer's skeleton body. But Izuku didn't stop there, he began to generate hundreds of stars, which began to fall from the sky, as if they were rain. The gun bullets, the magic lightning bolts, and the stars combined into a gigantic storm of attacks. The powerful lightning bolts and stars falling at such a speed that only small flashes could be seen, made the effect almost seem like a huge storm. Killer's HP began to drop rapidly, it was only a matter of time before it reached 0 and turned to dust. Hyper did not stop, he continued to insist with his enormous rain of attacks, but due to the enormous overexertion he was putting on his own body, it was beginning to tire quickly. The dark skeleton is feeling indescribable pain, he can't bear it anymore. Filler Izuku. LV 20. HP 25 60 99 99. Concentrating all his strength, Killer manages to destroy the sabers that imprisoned his limbs, however the attacks did not dry up in the slightest. Izuku, seeing how his enemy broke free, began to despair, putting even more power into his attacks. Killer made a superhuman effort to even stay standing. Filler Izuku. LV 20. HP 1007 9999. Focusing all his strength on the lightning and stars, Izuku takes his weapon and begins to charge the magic beam to its maximum capacity. For his part, Killer, who continued to resist the rain of attacks, struggled to even stay standing, his HP was getting lower and lower. "Damn it, I won't fall, not like this," the skeleton shouted furiously. HP 305 9999. Filler concentrated all his remaining magic into his knife, which began to glow an intense crimson red. For his part, Hyper already had the magic beam ready, he aims at his target and without a second's hesitation he shoots. HP 12 9999. The skeleton with all his strength launches a powerful energy slash from his knife straight towards his enemy. Both attacks were just centimeters away from hitting their enemy's body. And finally, boom! An explosion of titanic proportions has shaken the foundations of the devastated city. A huge cloud of smoke rises as a convenience to both attacks. Filler's HP has reached 0. As a result, his body was turning to dust. As the dark skeleton slowly faded away, he couldn't help but remember his past. Hundreds of genocidal roots over and over again. Watching your loved ones die over and over again without being able to do anything. Until on one of those routes something changed. Toga had proposed a deal to him. That they will kill the monsters together. At first he refused, but Toga told him that he wasn't like that before, that his smile and laugh before were real. After the first reset he was confused, he wondered why he had reset, until finally he gave up. Every time Toga did something new, he felt something new. That's why he wants them all killed together. To feel something new. And he had accepted. Toga reset, but this time she would have someone else to have fun with. And so they did. Izuku first killed Flowey, then he went to Kurogiri's bar and killed him. But the time came when he had to kill him. He killed his brother Mirio. He still remembers her last words. "If my death makes you happy, then it's okay." It was the last thing his brother said before turning to dust. At the moment when his brother died, he felt as if a thread had broken, and that thread was his sanity. After that they continued killing, they killed everyone. Only for Toga to reboot to kill them again along with Izuku. With each reset of Izuku's eyes, a strange black liquid began to come out, reaching a point where this liquid covered his entire face, not letting him breathe. He didn't know what was happening to him, but Toga explained to him that he was being corrupted, that his soul would be like hers. That would be neither human nor monster. The only thing he could do at that moment was to say goodbye to his brother and ask for forgiveness. Once he became corrupted he continued killing. But it wasn't enough, I wanted to feel something new, I wanted complete control. So I kill her. He killed Toga and took complete control over the timeline. He kept resetting and kept killing. Until he met Nightmare, he said he was one of the perfect beings to plunge the multiverse into darkness. He did not hesitate to accept the deal. It was the perfect opportunity. To feel something new. Filler's body ended up turning to dust, leaving only his soul, a kind of black sphere with a crimson red glow. Which was swallowed by a kind of black portal. For his part, Hyper was breathing heavily, he had received Killer's last attack. Our consciousness had lost his right arm. Returning to his base state, the boy grabbed the place where his arm used to be in great pain, his blood slowly stopped coming out. Using his soul of hatred, the boy began to slowly regenerate his lost limb until he had it back. "Damn you idiot, if you hadn't moved at the last second you would have literally asked for my head," Genocide shouted in the boy's head, comically scolding him. "That's why I'm thankful it was the arm and not the head," said the green-haired man as he breathed somewhat tiredly, while looking at the place where his enemy had been before. "If I had continued down the same path of hate I would have very possibly ended up like him, but in the end nothing would have mattered, because someone else would have come to end my life. We must meet up with the rest, this battle is not over yet," he exclaimed as he disappeared in a flash of speed. In another part of the city, more specifically in the remains of the UA Academy, was Nightmare Izuku smiling darkly. "The end is getting closer," said the dark being with a smile full of evil. Final chapter. The light at the end of the tunnel. Nightmare Izuku watched with an evil smile as Hyper appeared in front of him along with the rest of his friends. They all had a look full of determination, none of them were willing to back down, they knew this was the end. Bear had also appeared next to him, who was full of aridity due to his battle against Ink. Before Izuku could say anything, he noticed that two of his friends were missing. He instantly turned to see the rest. "Where are Cross and Barry?" the green-haired man asked with genuine concern in his voice. The boy could see how Delta and Outer lowered their heads while clenching their fists in fury and helplessness. The boy's eyes widened in shock. Words were not necessary to understand it. The fact that Delta held Cross's knife in his hands only confirmed his fears even more. "And no, it's not true, tell me what's not true," the freckled boy said, or rather begged, having a minimal hope that his friends weren't actually dead, all this under the mocking gaze of Nightmare, who delighted in the boy's negative emotions. Ink stepped forward without taking his eyes off his enemies. "Cross and Barry may have fallen, but now is not the time to regret it. If we let our emotions get the better of us, we will be annihilated. The least we can do is win this fight. We will not let their deaths be in vain," the painter exclaimed with a serious look, although the truth is that deep down Ink was really sad about the death of his two friends. "Barry, you were the youngest of all, I would have loved for you to survive," he thought as the image of the deceased albino boy came to his mind. "Cross, you suffered too much because of your creator. I hope you can at least find peace and, if possible, reunite with those you love." The image of the mixed-eyed boy came to the Guardian's mind. Izuku couldn't help but let a treacherous tear escape from his eye at such news, but he knew that Ink was right, they had to win this fight. Shaking his head to eliminate those thoughts, he turned his gaze towards the last enemies that were still alive, which were on top of the rubble of what was once the prestigious UA Hero Academy. Bearer looked at his enemies with great fury in his eyes, but especially at Ink, who was seriously injured due to the fight, so much so that he was even in his human form. For his part, Nightmare remained behind Error, looking at his enemies with an evil and mocking smile. At that, Dream would step forward, staring at both evil Izukus, but above all his attention was on his brother. "You better surrender, this battle is already over, you have no chance of winning, your soldiers have already fallen, please, let's stop this madness, no one else has to die," the young albino shouted, his attention focused on his brother. For some reason that smile didn't leave him alone, it gave him a very bad feeling. Bearer clenched his fists furiously looking at his enemies in front of him. For his part, Nightmare remained calm with a mocking smile. Suddenly a big evil smile appears on Izuku's face, who literally had the word mistake written on his face. A great idea had arisen in his mind, in his words. "Ahahaha, you're right about one thing, this battle has come to an end," he said as he spread his hands out to his sides. Suddenly a large amount of light blue threads came out of the black-haired man's hands and began to spread everywhere. Cities, countries, continents, until finally these threads, in just a matter of seconds, had covered the entire universe. People around the world watched in amazement and fear as millions of threads had appeared literally everywhere, whether in the sky or embedded in the ground. But Hyper and the rest of Izuku's, they looked surprised and nervous at this action of their enemy. They instantly turned to see him. Bearer had a look of superiority as he looked at his enemies, but especially at Ink. "Damn it, what are you trying to do?" Hyper asked seriously. The black-haired boy still maintained his mocking smile, not looking fazed or affected by his enemy's words. "I think you know exactly what I'm about to do, don't you, Ink?" Error exclaimed mockingly. The white-haired painter's eyes opened suddenly as his gaze denoted horror and fear. "Stop this instant!" Error, Ink shouted desperately. "What are you planning to do, Ink?" Izuku asked nervously and worried. "It's going to destroy the universe," he shouted, answering his friend's question. The green-haired man's eyes opened suddenly upon hearing that. At that moment, he could feel fear and despair invading his mind. Bearer's threads began to shine brightly in a sky blue color, at the same time as the entire planet could be felt beginning to shake furiously. Little glitches, like those in video games, began to appear all over the world. People all over the world started to panic because of this. Izuku along with the others began to despair, feeling the ground beneath their feet tremble with increasing force. This was a sign that the universe was quickly reaching its inevitable end. "We won't let them destroy this world," Dream shouted with all his might as he summoned a bow and prepared a kind of light arrow. Seeing this action, the other Izukus did not back down. While the white-haired man summoned a large number of blasters, Hyper for his part began to charge a large amount of magic into his knife, which turned red. "Now," Dream shouted, firing a powerful arrow of light. The others imitated this action by firing their respective attacks at Error. The black-haired man created several blasters at his sides, which he fired at close range without hesitation. "This is over, erase universal code," Error shouted as he was about to erase the universe. Both beams hit each other, generating a huge explosion that shook the foundations of what was once the UA, while a large curtain of smoke rose. At the moment of impact, Error opened his eyes in shock. Little by little the smoke cleared, revealing the result. Those present opened their eyes in shock, unable to believe what they were seeing. What the hell?" was the only thing Outer could say, unable to get out of his shock at what his eyes were seeing. His friends weren't any better. Before his eyes a truly shocking scene was taking place, especially for Eren himself. This was because Nightmare had pierced his torso from side to side with one of his tentacles, as a result of which Eren was unable to destroy the universe. "Why you," was all the black-haired man could say, glaring at Nightmare. "My apologies for not warning you about this, Eren, but I couldn't waste this opportunity," Nightmare said with a cynical smile looking at the impaled black-haired man. "I knew that the moment you concentrate all your power to destroy this universe would be the right time to make my move, that added to the fact that those idiots of my brother and Ink weakened you. That means you've just been using us as bait. That's not cool at all," 𝒅𝒐𝒓 exclaimed seriously, but without losing his humor. "Damn, this kind of damage won't be enough to kill me," Eren growled with great difficulty due to his wound. "Oh, I know that, but I don't exactly want to kill you. You know, I suspected from the beginning that neither you nor the rest of the idiots could win their battles, so I created a plan B." Around Nightmare appeared 5 small black portals, from which came 5 inverted hearts of different colors. This act left everyone present in shock, including Eren himself. "Those are them," Ink said, unable to articulate his words properly due to shock. "The souls of our comrades," Eren finished saying, in shock just like the rest. Nightmare's smile seemed to grow bigger with each second. "While the rest of those useless people were dying, I was saving their souls for this very moment. I don't plan on killing you, I'm going to absorb you along with them." The evil Izuku's smile turned into a new one of madness. Those present were unable to react in time when the souls around Nightmare began to shine brightly, as did Eren's body. "No, stop!" Eren screamed desperately and terrified as he felt his body begin to fade away. The souls began to spin at great speed around Nightmare, while their glow grew larger and larger, blinding those present. The powerful and blinding dark light covered the entire city. The light was of such magnitude that those present forgot to close their eyes. When they were finally able to open them again, they felt it. An enormous presence worthy of a god. The power that seemed to have no limits. This power was so dark that it made the night seem like day. But what is that monster?" Izuku asked, completely terrified just by feeling such an amount of power. "And Nightmare?" was the only thing Dream managed to say, barely coming out of his stupor. Nightmare's appearance had completely changed, no longer resembling his old form at all. He was now just over 2 meters tall, had large wings made of deep red bones, above his head was a kind of geyser blaster, which had a sad expression, and was crying what appeared to be blood. He also had a row of 3 jaws, all full of fangs as sharp as knives. The upper part of his body had turned black, with what appears to be a kind of scarf around his neck. His feet were now large sharp claws. He had 2 long tails, which ended in sharp blades similar to scythes, but the most notable thing was that you could see the souls of those he absorbed around his body, 1 in each wing, in each hand, at the tip of his 2 tails, and on his chest his own soul was shown, which was an inverted heart as black as coal. It looked like a dark and twisted version of Izuku's Seraphim mode. "Nightmare? Haha, no, I'm not Nightmare anymore, I'm something much superior, I'm Dark Deku," said the one now identified as Dark Deku. His voice was incredibly dark and eerie. It was as if darkness itself had a voice and was speaking right now. "Dark Deku. LV. ATC. Infinity. F. Infinity. HP. Infinity." The simple voice of this new being sent chills down the spine of more than one of those present. "With this power in my hands, I will finish what I started. I will kill you all. I will destroy this pathetic universe, and the Scribble Sphere will lose its defenders," said the dark being with a big smile full of evil. "So let's not waste time and let's finish this quickly." The large skeleton would appear in front of Hyper in less than a second, his fist covered in dark orange magic. The green hair paralyzed when he saw his enemy in front of him. For some reason, while he looked into those eyes, he couldn't help but feel great fear. He barely had time to create a shield of green magic, however this was useless. As soon as Dark Deku's punch made contact with the shield, it broke into thousands of pieces, as if it were thin glass. The fist continued long until it hit the boy's body. The freckled boy could feel all the bones in his body shatter. As soon as the skeletal fist touched his body, Izuku was shot out like a rocket until he hit a pile of rubble with devastating force, all this before the astonished gaze of his companions. Hyper Izuku. LV20. HP 0.11650. The white-haired men were stunned to see how with a simple blow, the dark being had defeated Hyper. "Hahaha, this power is much better than I expected, hahaha." Dark Deku laughed insanely as he expelled a large amount of magic. The dark skeleton would hit the ground hard, generating a huge shockwave that forced the rest to retreat. Recovering as quickly as he could, Ink launched several bones made of ink at his enemy. However, a dark green shield appeared protecting him from the attack. The rest of the skeletons began to attack the evil being with all their might. Epic created a large number of big blasters. Without hesitating for a second, he fired them simultaneously at his enemy. At enormous speed, Dark Deku dodged the blaster's rays and then, with a large black knife, destroyed them all in a simple movement. This action greatly surprised Epic, however he did not react when his enemy appeared in front of him and gave him a devastating blow, with his fist covered in magic. Said blow hit the purple skeleton, sending it straight to the ground. Due to the impact, a huge crater was generated, followed by a strong tremor throughout the city. Outer tried to use his soul manipulation on him, however Dark Deku did not give him time. Using some dark blue threads he caught the skeleton and pulled him towards him, giving him a strong kick. Due to the blow, Outer could feel how several of his bones broke. Delta appeared behind Dark Deku, his body was surrounded by a large orange light. Using Cross's knife he tried to give him a vertical cut. This was useless because the skeleton protected itself with a shield. Delta was sent flying when one of the dark being's tails struck him with great force. You know, this is disappointing. I was hoping that they would at least give me a little fight, but I see that I was wrong. They are all nothing more than useless. Dark Deku said, smiling darkly as he watched the skeletons get up with difficulty. While this was happening, something was happening inside the green-haired man's soul. The boy could be seen lying on the ground. Once again he was in that totally dark space. Only this time around him were the different traits of his soul, including genocide. I can't get up, all my bones are broken, I've almost no HP left, the freckled man said in a monotonous voice. But our head is still attached to our body. The soul of kindness, which had the appearance of a 4-year-old Izuku, spoke. Can we still breathe? Asked the soul of patience, which had the appearance of a teenage Izuku before the UA exam. Yeah. You can still use magic. This time it was the soul of perseverance's turn to speak. Said soul had the appearance of when Izuku had just entered UA. If I can. Do you still have the strength to raise your fist? Asked the soul of integrity, who looked like Izuku in his first hero suit. I still can. If you can't walk then crawl, and if you can't crawl, then creep. Exclaimed the soul of justice, which looked like when Izuku was wearing his second hero suit. Don't hesitate, just get up and fight. Exclaimed the soul of bravery, which had the appearance of Izuku with the hero suit already completed. Keep going no matter what the obstacle is, exclaimed the soul of determination, who looked like Izuku shortly before the betrayal. Since it is your duty to protect this world, fight, genocide shouted. While this was happening in the real world, the skeletons continued to give everything they could to confront the monster that Nightmare had transformed into. However, everyone present froze as the entire planet began to shake. In all parts of the planet it was felt how the air became heavy. An incredibly powerful presence struck planet Earth. The skies in all corners of the world clouded over, turning completely black. Lightning bolts of apocalyptic magnitude struck the battlefield. Dark Deku is shocked by such tremendous power. He could swear that this power was comparable to his own. I instantly turned instinctively to look at Hyper's body. The green-haired man was now standing as a gigantic aura of all existing colors surrounded him. It seemed like the aura was getting bigger with every second. Large bolts of lightning fell upon the boy's body, which was now being enveloped by a sort of energy sphere. While this was happening, natural disasters were happening all around the world. Earthquakes, tsunamis, hurricanes, volcanoes erupted. Mother Nature has a screw loose. Little by little the sphere of energy began to grow larger and larger, reaching the point where it measured just over 2 meters in height. Finally the sphere explodes, creating an explosion so large that it could be seen from the outskirts of the devastated city. Dark Deku and the others had to hold on to the ground to avoid being blown away by the huge gusts of air that were produced. When they were finally able to open their eyes again, everyone saw a very tall silhouette. The appearance of this new being had finally been revealed. He looked a lot like Dark Deku, but at the same time he was very different. He was a very tall skeleton, with 3 pairs of wings, all different. The first pair looked like the wings of a kind of bird, these being orange with red parts. The second pair looked like the wings of a dragon, being green, and the last pair were wings made of purple bones. On his head there was a blaster. His left eye glowed red. He had a long tail that ended in a very sharp blade. His arms were black. He had a row of 3 jaws full of sharp fangs. Finally his clothes consisted of black shorts with white lines on the sides, apart from a kind of caper coat with a collar, this being of different colors. Hyper was back in the fight. And he had entered his most powerful form, his Seraphim mode. Hyper. Ink growled in pain. Dark Deku stared in shock at his enemy's new transformation before smirking. Finally, a worthy opponent, our battle will be legendary, the dark being shouted euphorically in excitement as he got into a combat stance. Izuku looked at his enemy with complete seriousness. Both were now almost identical, like 2 hours of water, but at the same time very different. They were like yin-yang. Dark Deku is the one who gives the first attack. The dark being ferociously lunges at Izuku. The skeleton patiently awaits the attack, covering itself with its arms in an X shape. It receives the brutal attack and is sent flying several meters. While still in the air, it instantly gets back up. It wasn't a good idea to measure your strength, he thought, somewhat dazed. Don't underestimate him for a second, he's unlike anything you've faced before, you have to be careful if you don't want to die. Genocide told him mentally. Let's try this. Izuku creates a pair of revolvers made of justice magic in both hands and begins to shoot at Dark Deku. Unfortunately, the damage is almost minimal. With his fists wrapped in magic, the dark skeleton once again launches himself against his enemy. This time Izuku manages to evade Dark Deku's attack, spinning on his own axis and dealing a lethal blow with his sharp tail. Screaming in pain, the evil skeleton couldn't react in time when a large amount of magic bullets hit his back. Hyper is using the magic weapon of his god form, which fired hundreds of bullets like a machine gun. Using a magic shield, Dark Deku manages to free himself from the bullets. To Izuku's surprise, he appears in front of him and delivers a devastating blow to the middle of his abdomen. Locks and knives, now Genocide mentally shouted. Izuku instantly uses the soul of integrity and hatred and summons a large number of blue blades and knives, which ferociously attack Dark Deku, completely surrounding him, as if he were a swarm of angry bees. It cost us 15% of our magic to resist that blow, Genocide exclaimed, surprised by the power of his enemy. I guess I'll have to try again, but harder this time, the skeleton exclaimed. Izuku summons 4 Geister blasters to his sides, followed by 2 magic revolvers. The skulls shoot large amounts of magic towards the skeleton monster, this added to the bullets from the revolvers managed to cause good damage to their enemy this time. However, Dark Deku manages to resist the rain of attacks and teleports again in front of Izuku, grabs him by the right arm and with an abysmal force, lifts him and slams him against the ground, generating a huge crater. Due to the pain, the blasters disappear. Using his tail as a whip, Izuku manages to push his enemy away as he stands up. It will have to be the old-fashioned way, then said the soul of determination. The sabers, now the soul of integrity, shouted. Izuku brings out a pair of white sabers, the same ones from his god mode, and prepares for his enemy's next attack. Dark Deku, despite his size, has enormous speed and runs directly at Hyper, who waits patiently for him. The dark skeleton lunges at his enemy again, just as he is within inches of touching him. Slash. Ayaya. A roar of pain echoes throughout the battlefield. Izuku had managed to land a cut on his enemy's chest, who roared in pain, taking a few steps back. The fight becomes quite even, but Izuku begins to tire quickly, his Seraphim mode consumes a lot of energy and he does not control it well. This is going terribly, if we continue like this we'll end up dead. Genocide said with annoyance. I have no choice, I have to use 100% of Seraphim mode. Izuku exclaimed. What the green-haired man said left Genocide and the rest of the souls in shock. Are you crazy? You can barely use 25%, using 100 would be too much for your body, it's practically committing suicide, the soul of hate shouted in concern. If you have a better idea I'd love to hear it. This time it was Izuku who shouted, leaving Genocide surprised. Are you sure of what you're saying? The soul of determination asked, this time with complete seriousness. If we don't defeat this monster, millions will die, there's no other choice. Was Hyper's simple response, who had a look full of determination, a sign that he was totally sure. The souls remained silent for a few seconds. Fine, whatever, don't say later that I didn't warn you, Genocide replied. Izuku's body was surrounded by a multicolored aura, while generating large waves of wind. Dark Deku could feel his enemy's power rising through the roof, and at this he only smiled with excitement. This just keeps getting better. He said with malice and emotion. Hyper's eyes glowed a deep red, while his body was surrounded by a large multicolored aura. Hyper Izuku. LV. ATC. Infinity. F. Infinity. HP. Infinity. I'm ready, he said seriously. Both skeletons stared at each other seriously. Little by little they approached, running at great speed. When they were finally close they threw a punch at us, their fists hit each other, generating an airwave. They instantly separated to begin attacking each other in hand-to-hand combat. Izuku jumped, dodging a blow from Dark Deku, who fell to the ground doing a leg sweep, which was dodged by the skeleton. Jumping and being in the air, Hyper launched several kicks at his enemy, who blocked them all with his arms. Both skeletons continued to exchange punches and kicks at high speed. They both kicked at the same time, and the kicks collided with each other, generating a small shock wave. They both jumped away to attack each other again in hand-to-hand combat. Izuku caught a blow from Dark Deku, and holding his fist he hit him in the abdomen. He broke free from the grip and threw a punch at the boy's face, who ducked, dodging the blow. Dark Deku jumped to fall with a hammer blow, which Izuku dodged the blow as consciousness hit the ground. Hyper launched a slash with the sharp tip of his tail, said blow was dodged by the dark skeleton, which jumped back, staying several meters away. Dark Deku would create a large number of dark blue blades, which would begin to spin at high speed around Hyper, causing many cuts all over his body. Izuku would summon several vines, those of his Omega mode, which would take each of the vines and begin to destroy them. While this was happening, the dark skeleton slowly approached its opponent. But the simple squeeze Izuku destroyed the last of the locks, now he was facing away from his enemy. "Come," was all the boy said, looking over his shoulder at his enemy as his eyes glowed red. Although it seemed that the boy mastered that power, the reality was very different. Izuku felt like every bone in his body was tensing more and more, he felt as if his body was going to break into 1,000 pieces. The simple fact of being standing caused him hellish pain, but despite everything he was not going to give up. Because that pain was nothing compared to the pain he would feel knowing that his world disappeared because of his weakness. Back in battle, both opponents were exchanging blows at enormous speed, each time their legs or fists hit each other, they generated a huge shock wave. Dark Deku noticed how Izuku was starting to get more and more tired. He could even see him starting to sweat. Only it wasn't sweat. The dark skeleton created a red knife and began to launch hundreds of cuts against his opponent. The boy managed to avoid some of the cuts, but several of them still managed to scratch him. Below Dark Deku a warning sign would appear, he would quickly move from that spot so that a second later a powerful bolt of magic would fall there. The skeleton threw his knife in the direction of his enemy's face. Izuku reacts quickly and using several light blue threads he takes the knife and spinning on his own axis, he returns it with even more force to his enemy, who barely managed to dodge it, which cost him a small wound on his cheek. "You're not as tough as you said," Izuku said, breathing heavily due to exhaustion. He could notice how his enemy was also getting tired, he even saw him sweating. But it wasn't sweat. In the distance, Ink and the rest were recovering from the beating Dark Deku had given them, and now they saw the battle between the two beings. "Something's not right," Dream said seriously, drawing the attention of the others. "What do you mean?" Outer asked, confused. Suddenly the little white-haired boy's eyes widened in horror as he finally understood the situation. "Oh no, this is bad, this is very very bad," Dream exclaimed in horror. "I'll stop with all the mystery and just say it, bruh, it's not the best time," Epic exclaimed. "Look." That was the only thing the white-haired man said, pointing at both skeletons, which with each blow and attack were destroying the city. The other skeletons looked very carefully at their opponents, only to widen their eyes in shock and horror when they realized what Dream was referring to. The Outer tried to say in shock. "They're melting," Ink finished, just as horrified as the others. "Their bodies can't handle that much power, they're pushing themselves beyond their limits, and this is the conscience, this has become a battle of endurance." Dream explained seriously. "We can't just sit here doing nothing while Hyper is literally killing himself, we have to help him," Delta exclaimed as he climbed onto a blaster and flew quickly towards the battle between the two beings. "Delta is right, I'd rather die in battle than stand here useless." This time it was Outer's turn to ride his own blaster towards where both beings were fiercely battling. So all the skeletons decided to go help their friend. Izuku launches a large wave of bones towards Dark Deku. The dark skeleton is not fazed by this and creates a large dark yellow magic gun. The weapon fires a huge blast of magic, reducing the bones to dust. A blue heart appears in front of Izuku. The next thing he knew was that he was sent crashing into the ground, generating a crater of biblical magnitudes, causing the entire city to shake. Before he could stand, several bones were stuck in his arms and legs, preventing him from moving. "Ah!" he screamed in pain as he felt his limbs being impaled. Little by little Izuku's arms began to melt, this only increased the boy's pain. The dark skeleton watched with evil satisfaction as his enemy writhed in pain, creating hundreds of blasters, all pointing at the boy ready to fire. It was a fun battle, but this is as far as you go, in the end it was all going to be in vain. "Goodbye Hyper Izuku," Dark Deku said, about to shoot. However, before he could carry out his attack, he was stained with red paint. "What the hell is this?" I asked, confused and annoyed. Suddenly the painting transformed into chains that held the skeleton down. In front of this appeared 3 big blasters, and on top of one of these was Epic, smiling as always. "Bye bruh," he said before firing all 3 blasters at the same time. The dark skeleton survived her screaming in pain, feeling some parts of her body begin to melt faster. Ink appeared in front of Hyper and removed his bones, freeing him. "Come on, friend, it's not time for a nap yet," said the painter, helping him get up. "Why you guys?" the boy tried to say with difficulty due to the pain. "You didn't expect us to leave you behind, did you?" Delta asked with a smile as he rested Cross's knife on his shoulder. At this Izuku put on a happy smile, he was really glad to have friends who truly cared about him. "I'm also happy about this emotional reunion bruz, but that guy is coming back and he doesn't look exactly happy," Epic said, pointing at Dark Deku who was flying totally furious. The skeleton's wings were half melted, as was one of its tails, which was weakening. This was his chance. Everyone was on guard. One next to the other. Side by side. No one was willing to give in or surrender. Giving each other a look that demonstrated their mutual trust, they decided to start what would be the last round. The battle for survival of the multiverse. Outer and Epic were the first to attack. Epic landed a powerful blow to the chest, forcing the dark skeleton to retreat. Following this, Outer shot him with hundreds of blasters, managing to hit him squarely. Dark Deku would back away as a dark green light covered him, and he began to heal very slowly. "Don't let him heal," Izuku shouted. "Cross, you may not be here anymore, but I won't let your death be in vain, I still carry your last knife," Delta thought as he gripped his deceased friend's knife. At that, Delta could feel two other hands helping him hold the huge knife. This appeared in front of the dark skeleton, and taking advantage of the fact that his guard was down, he gave him a powerful cut across his entire torso, while the knife glowed with a red light. Outer was in the air atop a blaster, while hundreds of other of these skulls floated around him carrying large amounts of magic. As if it were a beautiful rain of stars. Hundreds upon hundreds of lightning bolts fell from the sky and struck the dark monster. Dream summoned his bow and helped Outer by firing hundreds of arrows at the one who was once his brother. "Brother, I know you suffered in the past, but that doesn't mean I'm going to let you destroy all the universes. I hope that one day you'll forgive me," the white-haired man thought sadly. Dream would concentrate a large part of his power in a large arrow, which shone like a sincere star. Without hesitation he fired the powerful attack that hit Dark Deku squarely in the back. The monster let out a horrible scream of pain, feeling how with each damage it received its body began to melt. His ATC, def and HP, were no longer infinite. Although the same thing happened with Izuku. Ink created many hands made of ink which tightly held Dark Deku's arms and legs, not letting him move. "Now Hyper," the white-haired painter shouted. Izuku instantly created a large amount of bombs from his Omega mode and launched them ferociously at the dark monster. Using his tails, Dark Deku destroyed the ink hands that held him back and launched a powerful beam of magic at ink. The painter created an ink blaster and began to skillfully dodge the beam. He counterattacked with several ink bones, which managed to injure the monster's legs, which fell to the ground on its knees. All this while Dream and Outer continued with their enormous rain of attacks. Epic and Delta moved at enormous speed, leaving purple and orange trails of light, respectively, wherever they passed. Both dealt devastating blows all over the dark skeleton's body, which continued to melt little by little. Dark Deku created a huge rain of knives in the direction of everyone on the ground. Before the knives reached any Epic, I created a large wall of huge bones protecting them from the attack. Everyone got into position to finish off the monster. Ink threw out a large amount of paint, completely covering the monster. With a simple snap, the paint turned into chains that held the skeleton. The others, except for Hyper, extended their hands towards the dark being. Suddenly hundreds and hundreds of blue bones pierced the creature's entire body and limbs, leaving it static. "It's your chance, Hyper, finish it," they all shouted, encouraging their friend. Izuku ran at full speed and made a great leap, landing on top of his motionless enemy. The boy spread his hands out to his sides, beginning to concentrate every bit of magic left in his body. His hands began to shine with great intensity of all existing colors. In less than 2 seconds, a beautiful multicolored glow covered the entire city. As Izuku continued to concentrate all his magic on his final attack, he remembered why he continued to fight so intensely. "You want the people you love to live happily, you are full of kindness. You want to fight for your world, you are not afraid of the consequences or of risking your life, you are full of courage. You want to protect your world from those who cause chaos, you are full of justice. You waited for the moment of the final battle to put an end to this great evil, you are full of patience. You don't plan on giving up to anyone, you're full of perseverance. You will protect your friends and comrades without hesitation, you are full of integrity. Nothing and no one will stop you, you will never back down, you are full of determination. Knowing that they want to destroy everything you love fills you with hate." Izuku's eyes glowed red as he aimed both hands at his enemy with his most powerful attack. And screaming from the bottom of his soul. "Lightning Fianil." A huge ray of biblical proportions struck the dark skeleton, wiping it off the face of the multiverse. The entire planet shook wildly due to the boy's attack, followed by a huge explosion that ended up devastating the city. Izuku breathed deeply, never in his life had he felt as tired as he did now. It fell to the ground, returning to its base state. From the ground he could see the wind blowing away the remnants of dust that had once been the biggest threat he had ever seen in his life. Hyper. The boy looked up to see how Ink approached him and helped him up, resting one of his arms on his shoulder. "We did it, we all did it," said the white-haired painter. The rest of the white-haired men approached them, they were all very tired and injured due to the brutal battle against Dark Deku. Izuku smiled and couldn't help but let out a couple of happy tears. They did it. It was finally over. A couple of days after the defeat and death of Dark Deku, the other Izukus decided to help a little in the repair of the city because, in Ink's words, it was also their fault that it was destroyed. Currently we can see Izuku with a white-haired man in a forest on the outskirts of the city, which thanks to the Izuku's help was 65% repaired. Magic works miracles. Well, I guess this is goodbye. Izuku said, looking sadly at his friends. Come on Hyper, don't talk like we're never going to see each other again. Ink said. This isn't a see you never, it's just a see you later. The green-haired man smiled, somewhat more relieved at what the painter had said. I'm glad to hear that. The first one to fire me was epic. See you later bruh, it was an honor to fight by your side. Said the purple-eyed man, extending his hand. The freckled man returned the handshake with a smile. However, as he took Epic's hand, a gas sound rang out throughout the place. The old stinky pillow in your hand trick. The green-haired man said with an amused laugh. Haha, it seems I taught you well. See you later Hyper, don't let your hatred control you ever again, you don't want to be bitter like before. Everyone present laughed at Epic's joke, including Izuku himself. Of course, I make sure that mistake never happens again. This time Delta stepped forward while holding Cross's knife in his hands. I think it's better for you to keep it, you're the one he got along with best. The white-haired man said, handing the big knife to his green-haired friend. Izuku looked at the knife for a few seconds before giving his answer. I think it's best for you to keep it, Delta. You've given it a much better use than I would have given it. Delta opened his eyes in surprise at this answer. But he said very nervously and unsure. Come on, don't be hard to get, just accept it. Izuku smiled amusedly at his friend's reaction. Delta simply nodded and then gave his friend a hug. This time Outer stood in front of the green-haired man. I honestly wish I had known you longer, all I can tell you is to take care of yourself, my friend. The blue-eyed man gave the freckled boy a friendly punch on the shoulder. Izuku smiled happily and amused at this, it wasn't a super sad or emotional farewell, but it was sincere, and that was what mattered to him. The next to say goodbye was Dream. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for helping us. I apologize for all the trouble my brother caused. The white-haired man said with some sadness for his now deceased brother. Izuku looked sadly at his other self. He simply tapped him lightly on the forehead with two of his fingers. It's not your fault, don't blame yourself for the actions your brother did, he chose his own path. The freckled man exclaimed in a compassionate voice. The white-haired man looked up, looking slightly surprised by Izuku's words. Dream hugged the boy, who hugged him back. Haha, it's kind of weird hugging myself. The bearer of the 8 souls laughed. Believe me, you'll get used to it over time, haha. Dream replied playfully, separating from the hug. Finally there was the last one. The one who had started all this in a certain way. Hey Ink. I'd rather avoid this farewell turning into a yaoi scene, so I'll just say this: it was an honor to meet you and fight by your side, friend. Remember, this isn't a see you never, it's just a see you later. We'll come visit you whenever we can, and who knows, maybe we can teach you how to create portals and take you and your girlfriends through the multiverse. At what the painter said, Izuku smiled happily as his eyes filled with tears. Behind the white-haired men a large golden portal would open. They looked at their friend once again, giving him a smile. See you later Izuku, they all said at once as they crossed the portal, which closed instantly leaving no trace. See you later friends, it's not a sad farewell since you'll be back. Goodbye Izukus, until we meet again. Izuku finally said goodbye to his friends as some rays of sunlight slipped through the tree branches and hit his face. Epilogue. Well, that was my story, what did you think? A green-haired boy with 4 freckles on each cheek asked the 3 children sitting in front of him. The man smiled as he watched the children with big smiles of happiness and excitement. The first was a girl with blonde hair and bright green eyes, the second was a boy a year younger, with black hair and blue eyes, the third was also a boy with pink hair and black eyes, who was 3 years old and was in the arms of the blonde girl. I love your story, Dad, although the part where you turn into an edgy emo isn't the best. The blonde girl said with an amused smile. I'm not telling you anything because I know you're right, Lucy. Said the green-haired man, looking with amusement at the girl now called Lucy. I loved it when you beat up that Muslim guy. Nobody insults my mother, exclaimed the black-haired boy, raising his arms while holding his little brother on his lap. That's how you talk, Kaido. Izuku said, looking happily at his son. The boy took the youngest of his children in his arms. Tell me Natsu, did you like Daddy's story? I asked affectionately while tickling the little pink-haired boy. Haha, why yes papa. The youngest of the Midoriya family laughed. You never get tired of telling them that story, do you? A beautiful blonde woman with blue eyes and glasses entered the room accompanied by 2 other women, one with pink hair and eyes like a telescope and the other with light blue hair and eyes and wearing a hero costume. Do you ever get bored of the same old story? Mei Hatsune, about 36, asked with an amused smile. It's very entertaining. Kaido laughed while scratching the back of his neck. I will tell this story to my future children, Lucy said innocently and tenderly. At this, Izuku and Kaido's eyes instantly glowed red. Lucy, no children until you're 50, the green-haired man exclaimed in a serious and fatherly manner. The little blonde pouted tenderly at her father's attitude, while Nijire, Melissa and Mei laughed amused at this family scene. The years had passed and many things had changed. Izuku put aside the fights and decided to have a quiet life. He had already had haggard fights and too many unnecessary deaths due to his hatred. After all, what's wrong with a quiet life? But despite this, he never stopped training. Over the years he managed to master all his power 100%. You never know when a new threat might appear. Her relationship with her small harem reached such a point that they ended up getting married. Luckily, the government had approved polygamy. As for his former friends and his mother, he simply told them, I don't hate you, but I don't feel any kind of affection for you either. After that they didn't see each other again. Izuku no longer felt any kind of hatred or resentment against them, but he couldn't love them in any way. For him it was simply impossible. And finally the day came when their wives became pregnant, although not all at the same time. Not all of them felt ready to be mothers. His first daughter was with Melissa. They both had a beautiful girl whom they named Lucy. Next was Nijire. They had an adorable little boy named Kaido. And finally it was Mei. They had a baby they called Natsu. Ink and the rest of Izuku's had also kept their promise and had returned to visit their broccoli-headed friends several times in a row. They had even taught him how to create portals to other universes, so he now had free reign to go anywhere in the multiverse he wanted. But he knew his place was there. With their beautiful wives and their beloved children. She loved them with all her heart and wouldn't trade this life for anything in the world. Who would have thought? In the end, being betrayed brought him a new family and new friends. For whom he is more than willing to give his life. And this is known. Because he loves them with all his soul. End of epilogue. Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown and left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.